Thank you for your patience. A little computer work going on up here. So, good evening. Thank you for attending and welcome to our Tuesday, October 25th Board of Education study session. The time is 5:33. And Tammy, please let the record show that all board members are present. So we're starting with our meeting. At this time, please welcome Steve Hall to the podium to introduce our Pledge of Allegiance guests.
Thank you. Good evening, board members. It is our pleasure to welcome two representatives of our district's BASE program. Those students are provided a unique opportunity to acquire vocational skills while also pursuing their academic goals. Our guests, who both attend BASE at Cox North, requested the opportunity to introduce themselves and share with you more specifics about BASE. And joining us first is Mr. David Whitson. And Mr. Whitson will talk a little bit more about our students and guests this evening. Mr. Whitson?
Okay.
Thank you. So my name is Dave Whitson. I'm Associate Director of Special Services. Thanks for having us this evening. Super excited about our guests to lead the pledge this evening. They're both part of our BASE program, which stands for the Business Associated Student Education Program. We are at 7 different sites, businesses throughout the community. The Dream Center, Cox North, OTC, Mercy, Cox South, MSU, and also the Sheltered Workshop. And so students that attend the BASE program get a unique opportunity to participate in learning specific to job skills and developing those skills, anything from what do we wear to work to accepting feedback from our supervisors, making sure we're showing up on time, all of those very important skills that we know kiddos need to be successful after high school. So, without further ado, I want to introduce my guest today. Ms. Jan Foyer is our Cox North teacher, and her paraprofessional, Donnie Dixon, also joining us. And then our students that will lead the pledge this evening, Deldrick Jackson. He is a 12th grader from Kickapoo High School. It is also his birthday this evening, so that's right. As well as Blake Tunnel. He's 11th grader from Hillcrest. They wanted to tell you quickly about what they do in the BASE program. Deldrick?
And Dale's actually an 11th grader from Central.
Okay.
That's okay. The other one got sick, so that's okay. And it is still his birthday. Okay.
Yeah.
He's going to tell you just something about BASE.
Okay, I'm sorry. So at BASE, we learn job skills, social skills, and how to budget, and life skills at BASE. This is our awesome teacher. Hello, at BASE we
Good.
I job shadow at a restaurant. I learned how to cook and clean dishes. And that's it.
Great job.
Well, thank you both. We're so pleased you're here. If you'd like to come forward, and when you're ready, and lead our Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We're going to take a photo.
Covered, I can shove this in my mouth. Did he say salmon? I think he did say salmon.
Yes, we do.
Oh, Big Mama. Oh, Big Mama.
Thank you all.
Thank you for being here.
We'll now continue with our honoring excellence for this evening. Our first recognition tonight is Dr. Katie Kinzinger, who was recently named New Administrator of the Year by the Missouri Council of Career and Technical Administrators. Dr. Kinzinger, would you please come forward? This statewide honor highlights the contributions of a new leader in the area of career and technical education in Missouri and celebrates their unique and innovative contributions. At SPS, Dr. Kinzinger serves students as the coordinator of college and career readiness. Students and staff benefit from her strategic work, developing curriculum, cultivating partnerships for career exploration, and providing ongoing support for rigorous hands-on learning experiences. Congratulations, and if you'd like to share anything with the board, we invite you to do that.
Well, I appreciate this honor from the state of Missouri, and it is because we have a great school system that recognizes the value of career and technical education, that we can have these great programs, and I look forward to continuing that strong work.
Congratulations, Dr. Kinzinger. Tonight, we continue the tradition of special recognition for staff members who are celebrating their 25th, 30th, or 35th year of service this school year. So this year, more than 30 employees will achieve these significant milestones. A few of those special employees are here with us tonight so that we may recognize their dedication to SPS and to our students. Our first honoree is commemorating 35 years of service with SPS. Ms. Gwen Marshall, would you please come forward? Brag on Ms. Marshall. She is a coordinator in our Equity and Diversity Department. Since joining SPS in 1988, Ms. Marshall has worked in numerous positions within our school district, including early jobs as a lunchroom aide and a special education aide. Her ultimate goal was always to become a teacher. While raising her own children, she took college classes as time permitted and earned both her undergraduate and her graduate degrees from Drury University. And today, she continues to support our students and our staff district-wide. She does a remarkable job championing equity and diversity efforts for all students. Congratulations, Ms. Marshall.
Thank you.
Thank you to everyone and to the board and to everyone. I want to first say thank you. And as Stephen said, that was my desire. I came here in 1967. I attended Missouri State College to become an educator. And, well, life took some turns for me. And so it took a while to get where I wanted to go. But I always loved to teach. I wanted to be in the classroom. I wanted to be with the children. I always wanted to be connected. So it's a love of mine, from kindergarten all the way to high school. I've done a little bit of everything. So I just thank God that He allowed me to do all of the things I've done, to operate in the positions I've operated in. And I just want to thank everyone that came out tonight to say, hey, I appreciate you, because it's been a long journey. And that's all I can hear in my heart. It's been a long journey. But here we are. And I wouldn't have traded any of it, none of it. Not the hard times, not the times in the basement of studio. None of it. I've seen a lot. I've encountered a lot. But I'm very thankful and grateful to SPS, even to our minority scholarship. There was a minority scholarship. There was a Rosalind Thomas. And Rosalind said, with any extra money we have, we're going to make sure that you go to college. And I remember coming down Drury Lane with tears in my eyes, because I never thought I'd ever get there. So thanks to Rosalind Thomas and those that have stood behind me. Mark Dixon, who helped me with my capstone. A young lady I call Queen that had just helped me all the time, Regina Rogers. So many of you, just being there, just smiling, just acknowledging and saying keep going has just been tremendous for me. So I just want to say thank you. I thank God for being where I am right now. Thank you all. My new friend, Renita Latham. Doctor.
Like, I have to ask the gal who gave it to her. Where did you get those flowers? I wonder if it's her, like, niece or grandchild.
That's good. We want to make sure we're on the front page.
Yeah, get out of that one.
All right. Look forward this way. Look forward.
Nice. What's that? We've got a blue shirt. She was filming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And to my colleagues.
That's great. Our next honorees, we have 3 of them, have each been employed by SPS for 25 years. Our first honoree is Mr. Jeremy George. Mr. George, would you come forward? Mr. George is a social studies teacher, a beloved social studies teacher. I hear your name frequently at Hillcrest High School. We're so thankful for your service. All right.
Teacher at Hillcrest? I was busy yapping. Shame on me.
It's the old building.
Next, we have Mr. Gregory Gillum, who teaches 7th grade science at Jarrett Middle School. Mr. Gillum.
Like, you don't have to be a teacher. You can be like an aide or
Next, we have Mr. Larry Rivas. Mr. Rivas, would you come forward? Mr. Rivas is a member of our custodial services team and also celebrating 25 years with the district.
All right.
take my allergy medicine so my nose is itching. Because of the wind, it just can't.
And finally, please join us in welcoming Mr. Eric Wilbur, who teaches science and is the head tennis coach at Kickapoo High School. Mr. Wilbur.
So, gonna turn down. Are you cold? Comfortable. Okay. Okay. Then I have to be complicated. I'm gonna drink a whole cup of hot coffee. I did down.
Congratulations. My son had Mr. Wilbur last year, so I've heard great things about him. Once again, we share our appreciation to all of these dedicated employees, and next month we will continue recognizing the remaining service anniversaries. So now we are pleased to share with you another one of our many personal stories about employees who make SPS a great place to learn and to work. This month, our Your Story is Our Story video celebrates an employee who is making a difference at Jarrett Middle School. Let's watch and learn more about Mr. Jesse Monk.
Hi, my name is Jesse Mook, and I'm a paraprofessional at Jarrett Middle School.
It is incredible to have Jesse a part of this team. At Jarrett, we are embarking upon a STEAM initiative, and so we're wanting to provide opportunities, unique learning opportunities for all kids. Not only does he connect with Nino, the student that he works with individually all day, but Jesse is willing to connect with all students. Nino is 12 years old and has never written his name. And so Jesse played a pivotal role in seeing that come to fruition.
Nino's syndrome, Lesch-Nyhan syndrome, is a neurotransmitter kind of syndrome which can limit his mobility, and that's why he's in a wheelchair. That's why some of his movements can be sporadic. So I try to do everything I can to make sure he feels like anybody else in class. Sometimes related art classes are hard for Nino to be a part of because he can't play an instrument in band and he can't draw or color with a regular pencil. So I was like, we have these 3D printers that we're playing with here in the library. After a few prototypes and everything, we finally found an apparatus that worked best for him. We got a dry erase board out and he worked on his ends, and all of a sudden that turned into an N and a nice little I and another N and then a giant O. And for the first time, he wrote his name. The teachers now give him papers and he highlights notes. He takes notes in class like everyone else now.
This is not a job for Jesse, this is a calling. And Jesse has answered the call. He's in with both feet, and he has went above and beyond in meeting the needs of our students here at Jarrett Middle School.
I really have appreciated my time at Jarrett, and I'm working towards getting a education degree so I can hopefully teach at Jarrett in a few years.
Mr. Mook, would you please come forward? And you're also joined this evening by Nino, which is awesome. We're so glad that you're here in Nino's family, so thank you for that. Would you like to share anything to the board?
Absolutely.
Thank you. When someone said, what did you think when you got an email saying that you were being honored? And I just said, we were just playing with the printers. It's just another day for us. But thank you for recognizing that. It's easy to be overlooked at times just being the one guy who works with one student in a school of over 500 in a district over thousands of kids. But thank you for seeing the good work that we do at Jarrett and the opportunities that you've given me to do that work. I appreciate that, and so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So he typed it, right? 3D, and he could play now, and then it translated it to words. Something about the 3D was. I don't know, but. Joy. So, joy.
And that concludes our honoring excellence for this evening. Thank you very much.
You can find out.
Thank you. How inspirational, how joyful for us to have witnessed that this evening. So we'll move on now to the business part of our meeting. So at this point we're at 1.04, the approval of agenda. This is an action item, so at this time do I have a motion that the board approve the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Thank you. Danielle, a motion. Do I have a second? I'll second. Thank you. And Mary Ann, a second. At this time, please vote. I see that I have to log back in. So while I'm trying to do that, I will give a verbal aye. Okay, motion carries. We'll move on to 2.0 public comments. This part of the meeting is where we hear from our public speakers. So before we move on, I have a little section I need to read. Let me rejoin the meeting first. Okay. The Board of Education welcomes comments about the issues being discussed. The board uses this time in our meeting to listen to the public, but we will not comment or engage with the public during the meeting. The board allows for up to 10 speakers per public comment period. The board chair will call on individuals in the order in which they signed up. Substitutions are not permitted. Each speaker will be limited to 3 minutes and will be timed by the board secretary. And a note to our speakers, there will be timers on both screens so you can monitor your time so you know where you are in the 3 minutes. Comments must be acceptable for a business and family-friendly environment. Inappropriate language, gestures, or personal attacks will not be tolerated. It is inappropriate to address the board about individual students or individual staff members by name in open meeting. If you have concerns about individuals, these concerns should be addressed through the appropriate administrative supervisor, either in the school or in the district office. If you have materials that you want to share, please place them in the tray on the podium, and they will be distributed to board members following the meeting. So we will start with our first individual that signed up, and that is Michael Hasty.
Good morning, board. I'm going to talk tonight, kind of go on with what's been going on here. A lot of parents are hypercritical and bring the issues that we're concerned about. I've been so myself, but I want to kind of sing the praises of the teachers tonight. I want to talk about the good teachers and the ones that really, put their whole into this job. A lot of people have misconception that this job is 9 to 5, which it's absolutely not. This week alone, a lot of the teachers are going to be staying 10, 12 hours just to do parent-teacher conferences at the school. I'll be there later this week. And after one of my speeches up here, I actually got a call from my first grade's teacher, and she was very, very concerned about what I had said. And I wasn't attacking anybody specifically. I was just kind of speaking about the general sense of the district. And I just want to, go out and say that I'm not going to mention names, but the teachers at Pittman Elementary that I've had the privilege to work with for, 5-6 years now, are amazing. We have a reading instructor who's helped all 3 of my kids that have been in school learn how to read, and she does great work. I've had the privilege of working with the same kindergarten and first grade teachers thus far. We got new first grade and new third and fourth grade teachers this year, but I appreciate the open line of communication. Now, we can't control what people do in their personal lives, but I appreciate the board's move to include, as was stated in the weekly newsletters, 100% parental interaction with the teachers, and that's awesome. And one of my teachers, my kids' teachers, was trying to get 100% parent participation in the school meetings this week. We didn't reach it, but that's all right, and I appreciate that. I really, that's where we need to be, the transparency. And without these teachers, you don't really have a school system. So I just wanted to come up here, kind of take a few minutes and say that I really appreciate the teachers that we do have. There are teachers that it's a career. It's not a job to them. It's a calling, kind of like the military, the police, medical people. So I really appreciate that. And the dojo, a lot of people who don't have elementary school students, the dojo app is a fantastic thing that the district has, that we're allowed an open line of communication to our teachers with. And that's basically all I wanted to come up here. A little positive note, not so much railing on what's going wrong, but let's talk about the positive that's going on in the district, and that I, as a parent, truly do appreciate the good teachers that we have, the commitment that they've had to my kids, and just working to help my kids learn, and all the kids. I mean, my scope of understanding good teachers is very limited, but I know there's good teachers throughout the whole district. So again, I appreciate all the good teachers in the district, and I appreciate this board's move to make more transparency with parents and teachers and getting parents more involved. So thanks, guys.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to call speak Kyler Sherman Wilkins.
Thank you, everyone, for your time and service. I'm Kyler Sherman Wilkins. I'm an assistant professor of sociology at Missouri State University and proud champion of diversity, equity, inclusion efforts, but also academic achievement, because I don't see the two as mutually exclusive. I would like to start by again calling on the district to put out statement support for queer students and staff. Again, it's just the right thing to do. Advocating for queer youth in the middle of the Bible Belt can be a real challenge. A few board meetings ago, a member of the community came to the podium and said that I fraternize with minors. This phrase, fraternizing with minors, is rooted in a deeply homophobic narrative that gay men in particular relate inappropriately with minors, specifically with the idea of grooming them and priming them for sex. Needless to say, I was deeply hurt and offended by this assault on my character, and so I decided to meet with this person. And during our conversation, I was reminded that sometimes people say hateful, bigoted things not because of malintent, but rather because they are ignorant. You see, this person just simply did not know the definition of the word fraternize. Nor did this person, were they aware of these larger narratives about gay men, especially in a country that's persecuted this population for a while. They were just likely parroting right-wing talking points. I bring this story up because it relates well to some of the actions, both proposed and actualized, and rhetoric used by members of this very board. I don't know what is in anyone's heart, but I do know that the actions that have been engaged in have been harmful to members of my community, not only the queer community, but also the African American community here in Springfield. The radio show that focused on gender identity, discussions about the efficacy of safe zone stickers, and just real discussions about undermining the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion come to mind as those specific types of actions and rhetoric. While ignorance is expected, we are all human after all, elected officials must be held to a higher standard. And I encourage the board continue to educate themselves, and one place to start is to actually engage with people, those communities that you're trying to set policy for. I would imagine the number of folks who are trying to say that safe zone stickers don't matter haven't really had conversations with members of the queer community other than them coming to public comments and letting their concerns be known. So again, there's too much out there, too much information out there to not be aware, and if you continue to push these policies that are harmful, even when you're aware of how efficacious they can be to protecting our most vulnerable youth, it's no longer ignorance, it's bigotry. So thank you.
A Carl Hurd.
Good evening. Some of you may know that I had cataract surgery. Well, there's a downside to that. When I look in the mirror, I see blemishes I did not know I had. So anyway, very humbling, but what you see is what you get. I want to publicly thank you for allowing me to serve on the task force. I hope this report is informative and that you can find some information that is helpful to make your decisions. Many members of the task force took the position that the task force was only about buildings. This report takes a broader view. There are two central themes. One of them, loss of 1,150 students since September of 2018 is concerning. This report explores many reasons for the loss, including private, homeschooling, area schools, Mo Scholars, and Excel schools. It is noteworthy the previous $160 million bond has built many empty classrooms. Jarrett is open, 1/3 empty. News about Kansas City hosting 10 schools is also concerning. A new strategic plan is being developed. This should be adopted and implemented before any bond proposal. It is widely accepted that our 12 schools are failing academically, as measured by state test scores. Let's give the board and administration time to turn our 12 around before adding empty classrooms. The most transformative change in education is that taxpayer dollars follow the student. Arizona is a pioneer in this development, but R12 is going all out for launch, which will take full-time students out of the classroom. I was just handed a note that in R12, 673 students are full-time. Folks, those students don't need to build any classrooms for them. This gives parents who would like to homeschool but are not comfortable about teaching new opportunities for that. The destiny of Springfield School. What if voters say no to the 23 bond? Schools will continue, of course. There is no emergency. The board administration can make the tough decisions. Thank you.
Laura Mullins.
Good evening. I'm Laura Mullins, president of SNEA. I'm here tonight to speak on behalf of the SPS employees I'm elected to represent. At the August 16th staff rally, employees felt a surge of excitement as they started the school year, being told they were all important parts of the SPS team. Unfortunately, this has not been their experience. If you research what makes a successful team, you'll find common elements. And although I do believe we share the same goal of providing the most effective learning environment for students, this shared vision is the only recognizable element of teamwork occurring. One crucial missing element is good team dynamics. At all levels, our SPS team is riddled with mistrust and overpowering management. This creates an environment in which individuals don't feel like they can speak openly about their concerns because of fear of consequences. This is something I hear regularly from staff and admin alike. During my last public comment, I spoke to another lacking element, which is the roles of each team member should represent their area of expertise. Teachers are the instructional experts, yet decisions that directly impact their instruction are made by administrators, such as how they should write and even pace their lessons. Board Policy IGA tells us instruction should be adjusted to address the wide range of individual differences in student abilities and learning rates. Yet teachers are being told all classrooms of like courses should be in sync across the district. How is this what's best for students? Teachers would tell you it's not. Administrators should instead be focused on providing the resources and support teachers need and ask for to meet their students' needs. In the end, if team members do not have mutual respect for each other's roles, research tells us failure is inevitable. Poor time management is another symptom of a failing team. A team may have the perfect plan to reach its goal, but unless it can manage the time needed to put the plan into action, the team will be largely unsuccessful. Scheduling the time necessary to complete the task needs to be intentional and reasonable. Yet our teachers continue to have directives put on their overflowing plates with no solutions offered except the underlying sentiment of completing the work on their own time, a direct cause of employee burnout. The final missing element is lack of empowerment to make decisions within their classrooms. Last spring, I expressed the concern regarding the top-heavy model being put into place, and we are now experiencing the ramifications. We have novice administrators of all levels going in and out of classrooms focused on finding opportunities for criticism instead of asking staff what they need to be successful in their roles. Board Policy IGAB calls for teachers to use a variety of interventions within their classrooms to support students at risk of falling below grade level, yet they're told they must not veer from the district-provided curriculum or risk being considered insubordinate. Members of a true team must feel they have the full support of the organization, not a constant concern they are doing something wrong. You may call this the team, I call it management. Either way, if you want better performance for SPS, your staff needs to feel valued, appreciated, and respected.
Jasmine Allen.
Thank you for your time and service. I have just a few questions. If you were to move to Springfield, Missouri, what do you think would be perceived about this district, about this community? Are we affirming, welcoming, inclusive? How do we know that, and how don't we know that? How can we prove that? Or are we exclusive, intolerant? These are some examples of some neighboring districts. Columbia. On Monday, July 11th, 2022, the Columbia Public School Board accepted a $10,000 grant from a non-for-profit organization, It Gets Better Project. The grant is to help build a clothing closet for LGBTQ plus students. Some other questions that I have are, when are we going to resume training for our staff? And when will we honor Juneteenth? I know our neighboring schools that are similar in size, Columbia, St. Louis, and Kansas City, they recently did add it to their calendar to honor Juneteenth. It is a national holiday. And I know where you live influences the decisions you can make, right? But I know we can do better, right? We can't maintain the status quo. Our students deserve better. And then I'm going to also share with you some other state modeling. Seattle Public Schools, they actually came out with a statement, their school board action report resolution. This is actually back in 2019, so they're actually a little ahead of the game. Affirming inclusion of the LGBTQIA plus student, staff, and community. The purpose of this is to present a resolution in support of meaningful action that affirm inclusion of LGBTQIA plus student, staff, and community in Seattle Public Schools. The motion was that the school board approved the 2019-20 affirming inclusion of the LGBTQIA plus student, staff, and community in Seattle Public Schools. So they listed several research cases as to why they were including that in their resolution, right? And so I just asked, like, what does SPS show to other districts, right? We need to be a role model, and I really am thankful for your guys' leadership. Have a good day.
Thank you. Thank you. Kat Tressler.
Hello. After my last time here, I left kind of confused, right? Because I thought we all wanted the same things. We want happy, healthy, well-educated kids, right? So why are so many people disagreeing on how to get there? I did what I always do when something doesn't make sense. I went home and started to research. I went through comments on the strategic plan for hours because there are a lot. I read comments on local parent groups on social media. I spoke to teachers and other parents I know, and I even sought out folks that I knew were going to have different views than I did. Many mentioned concerns about behaviors in schools, and some felt it was the behavior of students that was to blame for their own students having issues keeping up academically, and that children should be more harshly punished. As I read through the comments that you're likely going to hear about in your review of the strategic plan tonight, my heart broke. Because as a neurodivergent parent of neurodivergent children, it's not children, I don't see children who need to be punished, right? I see children who need help. Child psychologist Dr. Ross Green has written several excellent books that I recommend to anyone who is interested in helping these children. In Lost at School, in the follow-up book, Lost and Found, Dr. Green states that children do well when they can, and that most behaviors classified as bad are the results of needs not being met. In his book, The Explosive Child, he helps parents identify lagging skills and triggers that may cause meltdowns, and teaches people how to prevent these behaviors from escalating into full-blown meltdowns. And I'd really like to see us reframe our conversation from dealing with behavior issues to helping children be successful in school by identifying why a children is reacting in the way that they are, instead of punishing them for having needs. The traditional classroom environment is not friendly to neurodivergent children, but sensory issues can easily be mitigated by reducing light, by adding sound-reducing filters on the walls. We can help teachers identify triggers by providing neurodivergent affirmative inclusion training. Neurotypical folks have a lot of a harder time, isolating what is causing meltdowns, but we can teach them how to identify those. My children have the benefit of having two parents who are also neurodivergent, who understand their needs, and we work really hard to communicate with their educators to provide them the supports that they need. But not all parents have the same resources. So I spoke to other local neurodivergent advocates, and we'd like to see Springfield Public Schools start a group that will help provide support to parents who are learning how to help their children, to teach them how to identify triggers, and in bridging positive relationships with teachers. We are willing to help. In fact, if anyone watching wants to reach out to me, I'm easily findable online, as well as local autism advocate J.R. Reed. We have resources, and we're willing to help. So as you review the strategic plan tonight, please keep in mind that children want to do well. And these are not bad kids. They just need us to do better for them.
Thank you. Okay, so that concludes our public comment section for this evening. So we'll move now to consent agenda items. So consent agenda items 3.01 through 6.03. These items were presented at the October 11 study session for review, and we have been given an opportunity to ask questions, have questions answered over the last 2 weeks. So at this time, the recommended action is that the board approve consent agenda items 3.01 through 6.03. So do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you. Sharita makes the motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Scott, second. So we have a motion on the table. We have a second. So are there any comments or questions? Yes, Miriam.
So I need one more round of clarity, and this is for Dr. Shaw. On it's 6.03, the transportation bus purchase. Can I ask? Okay. Tell me again why we have to approve this now before we find out about the grant.
So I think part of that is lead times on buses. We're already getting into November, so we want to be able to get these in the spring. The other piece is what the request to approve is to approve the bids that were presented, the pricing that was presented, and that administration will then decide the number of buses that we need to purchase or can purchase within that $1 million once we know whether or not the grant is approved. That will then either assist us greatly on the propane buses or it won't. But that's, I mean, it's really a timely decision. We want to get this in as quickly as we possibly can so that we can utilize the buses and have newer buses in our fleet. So, I mean, it's really...
So that we're efficient. So when we do find out, we can immediately, there's like a trigger to make a decision.
And this is later than we like to be, but it's, I mean, as we all know, the backlog on automobiles, and we're seeing this with all of our white fleet, buses are no different, that it's taking longer to get these things into production, and it's taking longer to be able to get bids back to us because of the supply and demand.
This is to lock in the price so that you're ready to move. If you do get the grant, then you will purchase some propane. If you don't get the grant, you will or will not purchase.
We will likely purchase a couple of them because we want to, right. We
got it.
Just because they're $9,000 more, we only have $1 million to utilize, and so we want to utilize those dollars the best that we possibly can to be able to get as many buses as possible.
Thank you.
Good. Any other questions? Okay, so at this time, let's vote. Okay, excellent. Motion carries. So we're going to move on to Treasurer's Report 7.01. Dr. Mulford?
All right, good evening, Board. And, you know, one thing that, kind of tailing back to the bus discussion there, it is possible if we see the value in purchasing those that we could bring back a budget amendment to offset that. So we'll wait and see what happens with the grant, and then depending on how hard he twists my arm, we may or may not bring that to you. Okay. Look at your treasurer's report. Really, everything's looking really good. Revenues continue to come in as expected. We do expect that to continue throughout the year. The big thing will be the auditors have kind of wrapped up their on-site review. This is the external audit that all school districts in the state are required to have every year. We do anticipate that report being to the board earlier than usual. And so right now we're tentatively scheduled for November 29th for the auditors to come and present that report to you. And other than that, everything else looks pretty steady. If you have any questions, I will do my best to answer those.
So let's ask for a motion, and then we'll get a second, and then we'll see if there are any other questions. Thank you, Mary Ann. Motion? Second. And a second by Danielle. So now, are there any comments or questions? And just again, I appreciate all the intense, detailed documentation that you provide, and we'll continue to work toward whatever the board needs to know as we get a new program in place.
Yes, so we are excited about that because we do hope that the reports themselves will be a little bit better format and more informational to the board, and we'll definitely be seeking your feedback as we transition to that new system. Before I step away, I do want to take a second to recognize a person, an individual, Chastity Daniels, who some of you may or may not know. She's our Director of Business Services. We're going to be losing Chastity next month, and she and her team are the ones that put together a lot of these reports. But Chastity has had an opportunity to advance her career and has been recruited as an executive director for a neighboring district. And so we're happy for her. We're sad for us, but we do want to publicly thank Chastity for her commitment to our district and wish her the best as she moves into her new role.
Is she here this evening?
She is not here this evening, no.
Sorry, thank you for us. Okay, so at this time, we will vote. Motion carries. So we're moving on to 8.0, which we'll be moving right on to 9.0. There are no board policies for review this evening or vote. So we're 9.01, our EGL strategic plan update. Dr. Ben Hackenworth is with us to provide an update to the board on the strategic planning process. So, Dr. Hackenworth.
Good evening. It's my pleasure to be here tonight to bring you this update. So you may have been expecting Jim Henson with EGL tonight. He was going to give you an overview of the engagement process and the results and begin to review some of the themes that emerged. Jim contacted us a couple days ago and he had a hiking accident and has broken a couple of ribs. So he is unable to be here tonight. So he and his team will be back on November 15th to dig into the themes with you during your retreat. But tonight I do want to give you an overview of the engagement process that took place from September 12th through the 26th. You've seen this slide. This is our planning process timeline. Everything there in gray has been completed. And of course tonight you're getting your October update. And again, the retreat will take place 3 weeks from tonight. And hopefully we'll have a draft ready for the board on December 13th. So the engagement highlights, again, this took place between September 12th and September 26th. EGL was on site for those 2 weeks. This slide highlights the focus groups and interviews, so the in-person, for the most part, in-person engagements that took place. You'll see that representatives were at all of our sites, including our administrative centers. You'll see focus groups for principals, focus groups for community, stakeholders, for parents. You'll see virtual opportunities. And of course, the board had one-on-one interviews with EGL representatives, as did the executive leadership team. If you kind of tabulate the number of in-person engagements there's 90 plus that took place during those 2 weeks. There were 451 hours of in-person interviews with 618 people. In some discussions with Jim and team after this process, they were very pleased with the turnout. This exceeds what they see in many districts, so they were pleased with the feedback that they received. This slide highlights the Thought Exchange survey that we administered. This one is for students. It was grades 9 through 12. Over 1,100 students took place in the Thought Exchange. 622 thoughts were shared and over 16,000 ratings. You can see there the breakdown by grade level and also by feeder pattern. As you might recall as well, we are required to survey students for MSEP 6, the climate and culture component. This will satisfy that requirement as well. Similar slide, and this is the Thought Exchange survey for adults. Over 4,200 adults participated in this Thought Exchange. Almost 3,000 thoughts shared and over 100,000 ratings for those thoughts. So a robust feedback there through this Thought Exchange. Again, you can see the participation role where each employee, parent, etc. And then also you can see the feeder pattern right down there. So next steps, EGL is in the process now of putting together their themes. They are still going through the data that they collected to see what the major themes will be. Consultants will be back on November 15th. At that point, they'll review the themes. They'll begin working with you on goals, strategies, activities, metrics associated with those themes. And then again, they'll return on December 13th to present to you a final plan. That is your brief update. Again, Jim will be back here in 3 weeks to work with you in your retreat work session. I'm happy to try to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Ben. I would expect there might be some comments or some questions from the board. I know I have one, but I'll hold mine to last. So this time, anyone want to ask Ben about some of the engagement process?
Thank you for doing the presentation. I have one question. You had mentioned that the engagement highlights for students in their participation in the Thought Exchange Survey was going to satisfy our requirements for the MSIP 6. And I was wondering, with only 1,106 students participating, is this a acceptable representation of our student population?
Yeah, the requirement doesn't specify the number of students who have to respond. It also doesn't necessarily evaluate the response themselves. So we're just required to ask for their feedback and consider it as we're building our school improvement plan.
How comparable is this level of representation to our previous climate and culture questions that we've offered to students?
I don't have that tonight. We can look back and see what our participation rates have been in the past and get that to you.
Scott, a question?
We're going to receive or meet with them on November 15th. Is that when we're going to be presented something, or are we going to get any information ahead of time? So a week ahead of time, or even the Friday beforehand, so we have some time to read it, digest it, and come in with good, intelligent questions.
Yeah, we can certainly talk with Jim and team and see if there's something that can be provided to you so you can do a little bit of homework before that work session takes place. So we'll be happy to get with him and see what we can get to you.
Okay, thank you.
I have two questions. One is a follow-up. So same question, but worded a little bit differently. I'm hearing two different things. I'm concerned that we're not going to see anything, but it sounds like we will, because here it says, on November 15th, board retreat to finalize the plan. So it's like, here it is, and I'm going to duke it out and finalize it. But then when you were talking about it, you said that we'll meet and begin working on it in November, and that we'll finalize it on December 13th. So I'm not really sure. Can you clarify what finalize means? I mean, I'm concerned that we're going to meet in November, and then it's presented to us in December. How that back and forth will work.
So November 15th, like I said, prior to that, they should send us a copy of the presentation or the results, however they put together their information. So that's November 15th. We'll dig into that data, dig into the themes, they keep saying themes that have emerged, and provide specific examples of feedback that they receive. And we will, from November 15th to November 29th, which will be our next board meeting, then there will be another follow-up where we'll discuss. They won't necessarily be here.
We'll have an opportunity.
But we'll have an opportunity. So just think about from November 15th up to December 13th. It's really kind of the feedback period, question time for board members to ask before the final plan is presented in December. So you basically have kind of a month to look at that and say, ask questions, come in, like you normally do, and then there will be follow-up scheduled with the consultant. So if there's something that needs to be clarified, then they would set those times up either virtually or probably virtually versus face-to-face.
Okay, so we have a whole month to kind of volley back and forth and get feedback. It's not just, okay.
Yes.
So the group of us will get together on those set times.
Board meeting dates, right.
But we'll have an opportunity to engage.
Yes.
Okay, that answers my first question. My second question has to do with development of strategic plan communication materials. So I don't know what that is. What is that? And I suppose, why is that coming before it's developed? If you tell me what that is, then I'll understand it better.
So I might kick this over to Stephen, but this is his team preparing documents that we would house a strategic plan in, the web page, that sort of thing. just preparing for the content,
Okay,
not
this
creating
doesn't really
it.
have anything to do with the board. This is just a
Right.
timeline. Okay,
Yep.
got it. Thank
Can
you.
I add anything, Stephen? Okay, just say that we'll be ready once the board takes action on the final version of
You're
the
just
plan.
doing the behind-the-scenes
Share it.
work.
Correct. Just preparing it to market and share it with the community once it's finalized.
Kelly?
On slide 2 for the schedule. So when do we actually vote on it?
December 13th. December 13th is the whole.
So we're going to have a retreat on the 15th, which will be our first opportunity as a board to absorb all the information, discuss it, apply our feedback, and then EGL runs with it. And then we're going to see the copy the 15th and vote on it that night. So I would imagine, so they only have a month to apply. Are we not voting on it that night?
December 13th. From November 15th to December 13th.
He meant the 13th. He meant the.
Correct.
Right.
Mhm.
Right. You said the 15th.
You said 15th. Sorry, I meant December.
Yeah, he meant
I was thinking December, which is still wrong, but December 13th. So I guess kind of the same thing that you were concerned about. I guess leading up to the,
You got the bad chair.
Leading up to the November 15th retreat, Scott had mentioned seeing some information beforehand, which I think would be valuable. But additionally, how early before we actually vote on it on December 13th are we going to have a chance to see what we anticipate to be the final version? Because I would think once we have a final version in our hands, which is still a draft because it hasn't been voted on, we would want an opportunity to get together as a full board and discuss potentially that it's not exactly the same night that we have to vote on. Would it not make sense to have something in between where the entire board can get together with a final draft version from EGL to discuss?
Yes, so keep in mind, and we can update this PowerPoint, so that November 29th date is off, which is a board meeting date.
I don't see November.
I know, it's not on there. Now I'm seeing it, it's not on
Well, we
there.
have a board meeting on November 29th, a regular meeting.
Okay.
So
Regular
we'll
meeting,
talk
so
again.
that'll be another
So we're
time.
thinking by November 29th, we might have what EGL.
They should, yes, they should be in draft form.
Okay.
And we should be able to discuss it publicly.
Okay.
At that time, and then, like I said, coming back, then we have to, 2 weeks, another 2 weeks. Based on that information, it's similar to what we normally do with different agenda items. You provide feedback, you ask questions, we go back, modify. Well, not we this time, but they would go back and modify. So you still have opportunities publicly to provide input, and then also to send in any questions or comments, or to meet with them for clarification.
Okay, in advance of that meeting, expecting that, this is a very important document and something that could require a lot of discussion. Hopefully we don't have a whole lot of other things on the November 29th agenda. And if
We do, but
then,
that's the business.
then I guess I would suggest if we need, either we're here all night or we find another retreat or workshop time we can get together and actually not feel like we're missing anything.
You can always call a special meeting.
Yeah, I'm assuming we're going to meet. In my mind, the way I'm thinking about it is, or we might have to. It's a very important work, and I'm already going into it with the attitude of, we're going to have another meeting in addition. That's just how I'm thinking about it. But then I'm a preparer.
If we could pencil a date just in case we need it, let's go ahead and do that, because it seems likely to me that we would. I'm just one opinion here, but
We are. You're going to get asked that question later on. Just hold tight. We're putting it in the parking lot, but coming back to it.
So it's November 15th, November 20th, draft 1, November 15th, draft 2, November 29th, draft 3, X date, final draft, December 13th.
Pretty much, yes. Got it. Sounds
Did that make sense? I just can't read.
And it would be helpful in this timeline if we saw isn't there a state deadline we're kind of up against?
15th of December.
Okay. Can we add that to this? I assume
And the reason we don't have the tentative, a possible another tentative, because we need to hear from them. Like I said, it's not necessarily our meeting. We need to hear from them on their availability, and we had hoped to do that tonight with them being here. So like I said, the plans got a little altered, but
And this was a schedule that EGL built originally, so obviously we can adapt it to meet our needs as well.
Is your sense that the state, seeing as they're making us in Tier 1, is going to hold firm to that?
Oh, yes. All communication we receive, they are definitely going to hold firm.
And all the other districts are proceeding.
What was that?
All other districts are proceeding with that date.
They probably
As
already
firm.
have a strategic.
Well, no, some have created new ones. And
creating new ones.
They're working. Well, they have to because there's new MSIP 6 requirements.
I wouldn't want to take the risk, let me say that, of not getting it by the 15th,
No, we
because this
don't.
is a live document, meaning we could change it.
Right.
That's a
That's
good
what was
point.
that?
I want to make sure that, though, that we're not sitting here with not enough information on the 13th to feel pressured to make a decision just because of
Correct.
the deadline. That's why I'm saying
That's good. I
let's
mean,
have
that's
as
a
many
meeting.
opportunities to converse before then as possible.
Right, absolutely, and those meetings in between will be able to help
Yeah.
get that, make it more confident we can get in by the 15th.
Okay, excellent. And the question, Danielle, did you have a
I
question?
don't have any questions except to also express what they've expressed. As much lead time before November 15th that we can get the materials to review, I think will help jumpstart the remainder of the strategic plan.
Okay. And then last, just to go back to the slide in which you shared the thought exchange, you shared the one, you had the one up for the students, the adults. So you have 4,230 participants in thought exchange and the 2,000 in thought. Talk to us just a little bit. So a thought exchange is an original thought. It's logged in by an individual. And then the thought shared. Talk a little bit about what that looks like. Because, I mean, I've done that. I've seen it, but I don't know that everyone else has done that.
I'll let Stephen review that. His team put that together.
Great question. So Thought Exchange is designed to be a virtual town hall. So individuals can participate in a variety of ways. They can go in and share their own original thought, and many will do that. Some will share more than one thought. But then we ask them to engage further and to review the thoughts shared by others, and then to assign a rating to that thought based on their level of agreement. So 5 stars would indicate, I strongly agree with this, this represents my own thought. 1 star would mean I strongly disagree. And so what that allows it to do is it allows themes to emerge, and thoughts that are rated high among a wide audience will rise to the top. And so that will allow that virtual town hall, you're able to identify themes based on both the sharing of thoughts and the rating of thoughts. So what you'll see is not everyone left a thought. Some people will go in and they will review thoughts left by others and assign a rating. And so that's where you see the breakdown. 4,200 participants, almost 3,000 individual thoughts, but then over 103,000 ratings.
I think that's interesting because then you can see that although someone's thought was maybe not original or unique to anyone else's, that they were able to rate that. Pretty cool way to do things. I mean, I don't know if the rest of you have had a chance to see what that process looks like, but it's...
I didn't know that you could go in and not have a thought and still rate
can rate.
thoughts. I didn't know that.
And I think this one of the benefits of using this tool is the more that we utilize it in the district, the more our stakeholders become familiar with it, and we do continue to see the level of engagement increase. So I think that's a positive thing.
Did you have one question on the students? Can you switch to that slide? Let me see if I can express this. So 32% of the responses that we received were from students from Kickapoo, but obviously Kickapoo has a higher population than, say, Central does. Do you have the data to say X percentage of students at Central responded?
We can get that. We can break that down for you.
It's not, just so we know.
That's something we can explore just to see what. So if I'm understanding correctly, you're saying to find out the number of students from Central versus total enrollment there.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
We can dig into that a little bit more.
Thank you.
And I will just say that it was great. We worked with our principals. So in addition to sending the survey to student emails, to individually ask them to engage, principals also did a great job of engaging at the site level to encourage students to participate as well. And again, it wasn't a requirement, it was at their will, but we did follow up with the leaders at each of those sites to make sure that students were aware of the opportunity to provide feedback.
Can I ask something else on this?
Yes.
So, I don't know if everybody had an opportunity to do this, but when you're done, at the end it has these bubbles, and there's like big bubbles at the top and there's smaller bubbles at the bottom. So my question is, when you transfer this information to EGL, is that what they get, or do they get the actual thoughts? And the reason I'm concerned is because somebody could say, I'm going to use buildings. We love our buildings. And somebody could say, we hate the buildings, right? Or we love the curriculum, or we hate the curriculum, whatever. But the word building comes up, or teachers. But does it actually have the sentiment attached to it when it goes to EGL?
It does.
Does that make sense?
It's a great question, and it does. So the report is robust. When you download it, it provides them all of the thoughts, ranked from highest to lowest, so they can dig in and see the individual comments. It provides a summary, so the algorithm involved, it will cause the common themes to rise up, so it summarizes it, but then it also does provide the individual thoughts to dig
Yeah, because those bubbles just had words, but there wasn't any like thumbs up or thumbs down, or okay.
It also does interesting
Cloud.
things.
Just the cloud, yeah.
It will provide both sides of an argument, so it will say this group of individuals felt strongly about this group rated low, but these are the common themes where they agreed. So it actually will do that as well. So you're able to see sometimes polarizing thoughts, but then common thoughts where people could agree. So that's the type of data that EGL will be looking at.
Even, I know in the past, I remember that at least one time that you shared some of that data with the board. I think we had an opportunity to see some of that. Is it okay for us to see some of that data this time, or is it just going to go directly to EGL? Because it is helpful to see what the arguments were. I believe it was with masking that we saw, or something.
Transportation.
It was transportation. And we saw the arguments on both sides, and we saw what their concerns were, and it's helpful to see that information.
Yes, that will be available, absolutely.
Except with transportation, it was multiple choice, so it was really easy to marry the thoughts.
When we close down an exchange, though, when we publish, it publishes that as a website, so you can kind of go there and dig in as much as you want to, and so that can be provided.
But wasn't that already offered? Because I remember going in, and I would come back another day and then another day because there was just so much input. But I tried to soak up as much as I can to be able to see what the common themes were.
Yes, and we can certainly provide that to you, what has been shared with EGL. So they're looking through all of that now. They're digging deep in the data, but there's those higher level pieces that would be available for you to review now.
And it would have been live, still changing when you saw it.
Exactly.
Yes.
Right.
So once it's finalized.
That's what was interesting, because you could see people that come in and they would, share that thought, and then you could see where we were going in a specific direction in that. So I thought it was very beneficial in that regard.
We can get more information to you in the meantime.
I only saw the bubbles. Was there more information? I only saw the circles that were big and small. Was there some other click that gave you more?
Yes, you can go in and look at how people rated different types of comments and things of that nature.
Oh, how would you have clicked on the bubble?
We can send that to you. Absolutely. Yes, we can.
The next time.
We'll do that. Yes.
Oh, I didn't know that.
You're going to
take a
email
lot
us.
of time. I'm sorry, Scott.
I'm sorry. You're going to email us a
lot
link.
of time.
We can do that.
Okay,
Thank you.
excellent. So anything else this time? Okay, well, we are looking forward to our November 15 session, and we are looking forward to some additional, or some information, some homework for us to get prior to that. Thank you for tracking that very much. Okay, we're moving on now to our discussion on to continue our community task force on facilities. This evening, Dr. Mulford is going to come forward and is going to introduce our next presenter.
All right. Good evening, board. Is this am I in the right spot, Miss Tammy? Yep, this is it. Got it. Proud of me. All right, it's good to see everybody. So we have a couple of components to this part of the agenda. The first part, where we have Dr. Brent Blevins, who is with us, and he is with Stiefel. And Stiefel is our, get the right exact term in here. I got it written down. But Stiefel is our, I can't even find it. They're our bond advisor. Okay? We'll just make it short and sweet. It's like financial something advisor. But anyhow, so they advise us on the bonds, and he's going to talk through bonds, how they work, kind of the amount that we can do for a no tax levy, the market, historical data, just a variety of things, and then give you an opportunity to ask questions. Dr. Blevins presented to the task force, received a lot of compliments afterwards on how he simplified the information, so I'm sure he'll do the same tonight and for the public. And I have a lot of respect for Dr. Blevins. He's well respected not only in his industry, but in the school community, and so we're fortunate to have him and Stiefel working on our behalf. So at this time, Dr. Blevins, come on up.
Appreciate the introduction. I didn't expect the great comments. Thanks, Dr. Mulford.
We expect some good rates.
Yeah, I understand. No, I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I did enjoy the conversation and engagement we had with the task force. I know some of you, I think, on the board were there that evening, so I apologize for the redundancy of some of the information.
It was good the first time, it'll be good the second time.
Okay, good. I'm glad to hear that. So my job here tonight is really just to make sure that we inform the board. And obviously when we talk about the bond silos and the information provided to your debt service fund, we're talking about your bricks and mortar fund, your Fund 3. There are some unique obstacles and unique understandings related to that. That's a separate account. It's a separate ad valorem tax that you have in your debt service fund that drives revenues. And it's definitely unique on how we structure bond issues. So my goal tonight is to make sure that we inform the board. As you all know, the number that's come out is $220 million. So the question is why? How is that happening? So we have some information tonight to show you, number one, where the 220 is coming from, the analytics behind that, and more importantly, is the conservative approach that we've taken for that. Obviously, the district passed in 2019 a 73-cent tax levy. Our job is to ensure that that tax levy stays the same. We do not want to put the district in a position to raise that tax levy. When we go to our voters with a no tax increase bond issue, we want to make sure we do that. So we want to talk about several of the conservative approaches that we have in regards to the amount of that 220. So there's our marketing group. Makes us always put our pictures on there, so we'll skip right through that. We'll go straight to the debt summary. I'm going to quickly this is kind of a snapshot of your current debt that you have outstanding. Each different series you can see on the left-hand column. The original par amount of $433, your current outstanding of $319. I want to take a little bit and talk about your callable par of $220 million. So what that means is when you do a general obligation bond issue, those are 20-year maturities. In those maturities, we have a call date, typically 8 to 10 years, depends on what the market's calling for at that particular time, to give you the best rates and still have the flexibility to come back and refund those bonds, prepay those bonds, or restructure those bonds. So those call dates, when they come true, for instance, after a 10-year maturity, on a 20-year maturity, a 10-year call, it gives the district to come back in with a 10-year maturity now instead of a 20-year. And if rates are in that particular market for savings, we can refund those, like refinancing your house. We saved the district millions of dollars over the last several years on those refundings, which is part of the reason why you're in the position that you're currently in. It's also part of our conservative approach. Like I mentioned, there's several things we've taken into factor with these analytics. We have taken no refundings in consideration on the numbers that we'll show you this evening. So that will be additional savings if we have that. So you've got 222 of your 319 outstanding that will be callable as we move forward with those particular series. Yes, sir.
Just a request. If you're going to use like an industry term, can you please explain that? Or like you say par or silo or ad valorem or anything.
Sure.
Can you please dumb it down?
Absolutely. We're happy to do that.
I'll follow along because if I miss a piece, then I'm behind and I'm having a hard time catching up.
Absolutely.
And can you also tell us when that 222 is callable?
Yep. Those will be in our graphs we'll get to in just a second. So the par amount is the par amount of bonds. So when you go issue bonds, let's say it's $220 million. You're going to issue a part of them as par and a part of them as premium, depending on what the market calls for. When rates are lower, like they have been in the past, then investors want, some investors want a premium bond. In other words, they pay more for a bond than what it's worth, and they get a little bit of a higher yield. And we go into the market looking to see where that kick is between par, premium, and discount bonds. So you could have a variety of how we sell those bonds. Majority of them will be par, some will be potentially discount, and some will be premium bonds. The goal is to get you the amount of bonds that we can, the most proceeds, with the lowest interest rate. So a par amount would be the original par amount. So let's say we issue $220 million of bonds. After we pay out your cost of issuance and we sell your bonds, you may have $225 million total proceeds just by the way the par, the premium, the discount bonds work that get deposited in your construction fund. The par amount would be the par amount of bonds that we sell. So it could be $220 million, let's say. So your par amount that you currently have outstanding is $319. That does not include your interest. Okay, so that's the par amount of bonds that you have outstanding. It's the principal amount, not the interest amount. So, for example, your Series 2010, you currently have $7.5 million outstanding. Your Series 12, $4.7 and change outstanding. Your Series 14, $42. Your Series 17 was $98 million, which was a refunding, as was the prior ones. And then, obviously, your Series 19 and 20, if you remember, in 2019, you passed your bond issue. We broke those up in two chunks, two tranches. We issued $141 million the first time, and $24.9 million the second time. The reason for that, which we'll get into a little bit, is when you'll need those bonds. You may issue them, and the market's going to tell us that, right? So if you pass this and you have $220 million that we're going to go issue, we may issue all of them at one time because we may see interest rates continue to increase. We want to get in the market, get those interest rates locked in by selling those, and then you start getting some return on investment because we'll invest those bond proceeds. It'll also depend on whether you're shovel ready. In other words, your projects. When are you going to need those proceeds as you move forward? So, for instance, you may be in a situation where those projects are going to take more than 3 or 4 years. IRS regulations tells you got to spend the majority of those bonds, 65%, within the first 3 years, 80% within the first 5 years. Reason being is they don't want you sitting there accruing interest on bonds that you've gone out and borrowed in your debt service fund. So the IRS will penalize you for that. So the way we structure these and issue those will all depend on the market at that particular time, what we see the market being in regards to callable premium or par bonds, whether we go 1 or 2 tranches, depending on, we'll get that from your construction management team on their draw schedule when you'll need those expenses, and then we'll make those decisions as following. Did that answer your question?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you for going.
Yeah, you absolutely. No, I get it.
Really, the question, or I guess the request, wasn't so much for that. That was very helpful. Just saying throughout this presentation.
Absolutely will.
If you kind of hear yourself saying an industry term, if you wouldn't mind just breaking that down a little bit.
Yes, absolutely.
So par is, let's say you're buying a $100 bond, you're paying $100 for it.
That's right.
Premium, you pay a little bit more.
That's right.
Discount, you pay less.
You pay less, correct.
But then you pay less, but you're going to get the same percent, so you actually make more.
You're actually going to get a lower yield with the discount bonds.
So the yields change?
That's right.
Depending on what you're...
That's correct.
So if I went out and got a 5% bond today at par and I paid par for it, that's what I would get?
Correct.
But if I paid premium, I'd get more than 5%?
That's correct.
Because I paid more?
That's right.
In discount, I'd pay less, but get
less.
Like 4.96 or something.
Yeah, whatever the market would be at that
Infinitesimal.
time for discount bonds, correct. Yep. So you can see here in the pretty graphs that are scattered all over this page, you've got your distribution of outstanding par. Basically, that's the percentage of each particular outstanding series. Then you have the distribution of the aggregate, which also includes your interest payments. And then back to your question, you can see at the bottom, there's your callable by series. And I'll have to look at my glasses here because I get really small. I apologize. You can see you've got just over 20 million, the series 2020. You can see the blue's callable, the green's non-callable. The 2019 has a significant amount of callable bonds, which is the majority part of your outstanding bonds that will be callable. Hopefully, rates will be in a position on your 10-year call that we can go back and refund that and save some dollars. Your 17, your 14, your 12, and your 10. You can see the green is non-callable and the blue is callable. The next one is callable by coupon, so we look at the coupons of those particular bonds to see where the current rates are compared to what the coupons are for those outstanding bonds to see if we can go back in and refund those. Refinance, just like we'd refinance your homes. And then on the second part, again, there's the amount callable by par totals in the blue and non-callable in green. The bottom just is, again, an example of what we've already talked about, each specific series and what they were used for. You can see that the 10, the 12, and the 14 are refundings, as well as the 17, and then obviously the 19 and 20 was the bond issues that we issued on your last no tax increase bond issue. All right. Any questions? Yeah. I'm sorry.
So the 2019, when is it callable, the bonds that we sold in 2019?
Yeah, you can see over on the left, you've got 140 million of the 2019. There's just a very small amount that is non-callable. Most of those bonds will be callable in 2029.
Oh, 2029.
Yeah, it's usually a 10-year call. People ask, why do we set call dates? The bottom line is we try to set the call dates on what the market's telling us. So our goal is to give you flexibility, but not cost you yield. So if I'm an investor and we put a 5-year call on a 20-year bond, as an investor, I'm only guaranteed those rates up to the call date, right? So that's going to kick your interest rates up because investors are only guaranteed that rate up to your call date. If we have a 10-year bond, then your rates are going to go down because investors are guaranteed that rate up to 10 years. So we like to see that halfway through the maturity of those bonds to where you have the potential to come back in and refund those. It doesn't cost you a lot of yield by having a shorter call, but it still gives you the flexibility about halfway through that maturity. Make sense? Hey, very good. All right, I'm going to move on. So this is our cash flow analysis. So this tells you really where the 220 is coming from. So I'm going to kind of go through each line again. These are a lot of numbers. I know. I wish we could simplify it, but it just can't be done. So I apologize for the small print. I put some historical data on here as well. You can see I've started in fiscal year 2019 and gone out to all the way to 2043, which these bonds would obviously go out to 2043. Your existing debt goes out to 2040 because these are 20-year maturities. You can see in 2019 your assessed value was $3.6 million. You had a 1.29% growth rate. You say, what's growth rate? That's your assessed value. So when you take your 73 cents that your current debt service levy is at, and you multiply that by your assessed value, gives you your total revenues. Very simple, right? You've got 73 cents multiplied by your assessed value gives your total revenues that's going to your debt service fund each year. So if you look at the middle column that says total revenues, you can see that's what we're estimating that you bring into your debt service fund each year based upon the 73 cents in your assessed value. There's your existing debt service payments for each fiscal year. Now, I have put in the 2023 hypothetical because that's the question. What does your fund balances look like with the $220 million hypothetical built in? You can see we've put our payment schedule in for the 2023. Now, is that exactly what it's going to look like? Absolutely not, because we don't know what the market's going to be when we issue these bonds in May or June. But that's where it would be close to that. And we do have some interest rate cushion built in on that, which we'll talk about in just a minute when we talk about our conservative approach and estimating the $220 million. You look at the surplus deficit, so you can see each line going through. That's an annual surplus deficit. So let's go down to 2023. You got your assessed values $4.3 billion. You've got 4.9% growth. You're thinking that's a non-reassessment year. That's a good growth on a non-reassessment year. Reason being is mostly for personal property. As you all know, we saw an increase in personal property across the state, across the country. So you had a nice increase due to personal property for a non-reassessment year. There's your 73-cent levy generating $32.5 million. Your existing debt service in fiscal year 2023 is $27.3 million. Your first hypothetical payment for your 2023 would be 7.8 because that's a September interest payment. Your surplus for that particular year would be $371,000. Your fund balance is what I want to talk about. So you can see your fund balance in 2023, $22.4 million. Now our goal is to focus on the fund balance. That's where it's at. As you know, each year you set your tax rate calculation, your Form C calculation. You also do your Form A for your operating. The Form C calculation, you're allowed to have 2 calendar year payments in reserve. Okay? So our goal is to keep your fund balance where you have 2 calendar year reserve in there, but obviously we don't want to have 2 less so that you make your payments. So there's a sweet spot there that we want your fund balance to be at, to where your 73 cents is creating about 2-year calendar year payments of your debt service, but obviously enough surplus that if you saw some economic downturns, you'd have some fund balances to make those payments moving forward. So you can see with the hypothetical built in, the hypothetical, as you can see on the left, is $220 million. The payments are in there. So if we go to 2024, when your first payment comes up, you can see your fund balances went from 22.4 to 22.7. Then they go up to 23.2, 23.7, 24.3. Each and every year out to 2043, your fund balances continue to increase after issuing $220 million. So that is great news. That's very, very good. So not only does that tell you that you're in great position for the existing bond issue for $220 million, the question I get a lot, well, what does that mean moving forward? Is this going to lock us out of the market 5, 7, 8 years from now? And I'll get to that in just a second. The answer is no, because you can see your fund balances are very good. So part of that, and another question I get a lot, 3% growth. What if we don't get that? Okay? Now I will tell you, you can see you have grown over that. We'll talk about this in a minute much more in detail, your assessed value growth, because that is one of the most critical components that we're looking at when we're looking at long-range planning. When we're looking at what's driving revenue in your debt service fund to make your payments and for future bond issues.
Before you go to the assessed value, so the fund balance is increasing. Why? Because the surplus is adding to it?
That's correct.
Why do we have a surplus?
So your surplus is basically, like I just mentioned, you want a surplus in your debt service fund because if you have a following year where we have projected 3% growth and you get 1% or 0.5% during an economic downturn. You know, we saw that in 2008 when we had the Great Recession.
You're assuming the surplus based on these growth rates.
That's correct.
Got it.
Yes, absolutely. The 3% growth rate is a surplus based upon what's driving revenue, and then obviously your existing debt service payments are coming out of that.
And then you have 6.98% for 2022.
That's correct.
And that was a non-assessment year.
That's correct.
And then 2020.
No, that was a reassessment year. 2022 is reassessment. 2023, 4.91 was a non-reassessment year. That was tax year 2022. This is fiscal year.
Okay.
And so we're estimating a 2024 at 6%. Reason being, it's a reassessment year. Obviously, we are hearing this from across the state from counties that they're anticipating a large reassessment. We feel that based upon almost 5% on a non-reassessment year, as they go into reassessment, we'll see roughly 6%.
For 2022, that's where we're sitting right now. So last year for 2021, you put 0.23 because they didn't raise property values here.
Yes.
Personal property values were not touched. So
Right.
2022, that's 6.98. You're getting that figure based on the
actual data.
county assessors.
That's correct.
Has given you that number?
Correct.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
And that's an estimation.
The 2022 and 2023 are not. The 2024 and beyond are. So we're estimating a higher than what we have in the past because of obviously current.
So you know there's going to be 6.98% increase for this year's.
There already was.
So yes, you had that. You had that. So the calendar year and tax year are different. So the calendar year is the calendar year that the district receives those funds. So you don't get those funds until.
So this is the receipt. This is
Correct.
not the assessed. This is when we're receiving it.
Correct. So if you look at 2022, which was a reassessment year, tax year 2021, fiscal year 2022, you saw 6.98% growth. 2023, you saw 4.91. In 24, the 6% and beyond is estimates. The ones prior to that are actuals. So your last, this last 2023, the 4.91 is actual.
2024 is going to be the reassessment that's coming up
In 2023?
Yes.
Okay.
Get the revenues in 2020.
Right.
That's why 2020. Okay. And you're putting that at 6%.
We're estimating at 6%, correct. And then you can see we dropped that moving forward because at that particular time we want to be conservative. We just, we're going to talk about that later. You've grown over that. We want to be realistic because we don't want you doing capital planning and facility planning way below where you should be, but at the same time we want to be very conservative to make sure that the 73 cents does not change.
So can I, So there's assessment years and non-assessment years.
Correct.
And then we can see two actual non-assessment years where we have the data, 19 and 21, where it's at 1.29% and 0.23%. So I can't see before that, but obviously you have that data somewhere. Why moving forward in future non-assessment years would you still have it at 3%, the same assessment years? And
yeah,
so I imagine you have a version of this where you shopped it and said, is that something that we could receive at some point where we see that this is your, as you say, your conservative approach, but is there a
more conservative?
Is there a shocked version of this where there's years where there's no growth, especially where I'm seeing historically in 2019 and 2021, those were potentially pretty good economies that saw no growth because it was a non-assessment year.
Right.
Why would we expect every non-assessment year after that to still be higher, 3 times higher than it was last year?
Yeah, so the 3% is an average. So, but we could actually put in, 5 and 2 or 5 and 1. We can make that average be whatever it is, reassessment. We just put it in as an average that we're seeing annually. Obviously, above that on reassessment years, below that on non-reassessment, except for when you saw something similar to this year, right? And I do want to make the point, and I'm going to get into this a lot more detail in a minute, that these reassessment percentages are really about future planning. So the 220 million, which I'll talk about in a minute, you've grown 80% over the last 20 years, okay, on your assessed value. The 220 million, you would have to grow, for your 73 cents to support that, you would have to grow 9.9% over the next 20 years. You've grown 12% in 2. So that tells you how conservative we're being. This growth model at 3% annually is really about future issuance. And I'm going to go ahead and jump because it has the same information. It just adds one. So you can see I went ahead and said, okay, what's the stress test for the next bond issue? You can see in 2027, so we've got both in 2023 at 220 million, and then I've added in 2027 an additional 180 million. No tax increase, 73 cents on your debt service levy at the 3%, and you can see your fund balances are still growing annually. Now, let's say we don't see an annual increase of 3%. Maybe it's 2.5%. That change won't impact it too much because you still see significant increases in your debt service fund balance. But let's say we see some really low reassessments. That number may drop to, instead of 180 a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now. By the time we get there, that number may drop. It may go up. I will tell you in 2019, we told you that you would be able to do 130 million in 2023. You're at 220. So our conservative approach came in, and obviously you're in a much better position. But we want to tell you conservatively speaking. So this is a conservative approach as well. The 2027 at 180, if it's not conservative enough, it doesn't impact your 220. You've got the funds to pay the 220. It impacts what we're talking about your next bond issue. The 180 may go to 130, if that makes sense. It may go to 250 if our AVs go above the 3% that we're projecting. So we try to just take some historical data and say what you've grown over the last 20 years. I already have so many out there. I didn't want to go back to 2010 and really hurt your eyes. But we can get you that information and show you what you've grown annually each and every year. But we try to also look at where the interest rates currently are, because your CPI typically falls within that range of interest rates and growth. In other words, you're not going to typically see a CPI or a growth rate at 5, 6, 7% and rates be at 2. They typically follow each other, if that makes sense. So we use a little bit of that in our analytics in regards to what we're estimating on growth rates as well. Back to this, you can see that even with an additional 2027, because I always like making sure that boards know what's next. If we do this, when's next and how much next? And so that 3% growth rate is just a model based upon that historical data to say that 3% growth, which is well below what you've seen the last 10, 20 years, you're still looking at an additional 180 million no tax increase in 2027. I didn't add it because I've got enough information to put you to sleep tonight, but you've also in 2033 got another 130 million with that current growth rate. So really we look at 3 phases out. We want to make sure the board sees obviously the long range plan. Okay? Any questions on that? So how do we get that? How do we get to that point? This is just a summary of the revenues that go into your Fund 3. I won't spend a lot of time on that. This is just the data that we use on the previous slides that I showed you to get that rate and to get that amount. So you can see, again, your assessed value, the growth that you've had, the tax levy, same information. Other than you can see that's the taxes that you actually collect. You can see your collection rate. We've estimated at 99%. You've been a little above that. You say, how in the world do we collect 101%? You get current taxes and you also get delinquent taxes. And sometimes you get, with both those revenue streams, you actually collect over 100%. So we estimate that at 100%. You get a little bit of interest on your income, a little bit of federal revenue that comes in on some QSCBs. You got some other revenues for road and utility. These are just line items that go into your Fund 3. You got some classroom trust fund money that goes in there. And so that final right column is just the revenue that goes into your debt service fund that then goes back to follow your cash flow analysis on the prior pages. Just some data that can backtrack where I get those numbers. Okay? Now, here's your bonding capacity recapture schedule. This is something that I think is important to talk about. There's two types of bonding capacities. There's what your district can afford based upon your current debt service levy, and there's a constitutional bonding capacity. So there's two bonding capacities. We have several districts, even here in the Springfield Metro, that actually have a debt service levy that could afford more than what they can go out and run for a no tax increase. Reason being is you can only go out and borrow 15% of your assessed value. Many of you see legislation each and every year at Jeff City trying to increase that to 20 because some districts are asking for local control, that if we have the levy to do that and our constituents pass it, we should be able to do it. It has not passed, obviously. So the Missouri Constitution only allows you 15% of your assessed value to go borrow. A lot of districts are up against that. That's a bigger issue than their actual levy. For Springfield, that's not the case at all. Okay, your 73 cents is well below what we call your constitutional bonding capacity. So you can see in this slide in 2022, I'm going to move 15%. You can see your local assessed, state assessed, your TIF comes out, or I'm sorry, it's counted in. Your total assessed property, 4.1 billion, and then 15% of that is 624 million. Your debt service fund balance goes back into that. Your gross bonding capacity is $646 million. You have 318 outstanding. Your net bonding capacity is 327 million. So if you had a levy high enough, you could actually go out and run a $327 million bond issue and still be at your 15% constitutional bonding capacity of your assessed value. That's a good thing that you're not up against that. Okay, that you're well below the 15% of the Missouri constitutional bonding capacity. So let's look at if the board so chooses to move forward with a bond issue and what that would look like from your bonding capacity. Obviously, same data moving across. You can see that we've built in the hypothetical 2023 balance, $220 million. Your bonding capacity is still $151 million in 2023, your constitutional bonding capacity. You can see each and every year that grows. You look at 2030, your constitutional bonding capacity is already up to $480 million. So that will never be a challenge for this board or this district moving forward based upon the levy that you currently have compared to the constitutional bonding capacity because of your assessed value. Any questions on your constitutional bonding capacity?
What's the September interest payment? What is that?
Yeah, so we plug that in. That's a good question. So that's your first payment on the hypothetical 2021 would actually be a September payment of 2023. I'm sorry, your 2022. So we plug that one payment in there. Your first payment would be September 1st of 2023. So we want that payment in there because that obviously impacts your constitutional bonding capacity. So you have September and March payments, or biannual payments when your debt service pays.
Well, Brent, I was quickly asking you kind of touched on this. So how are we in comparison to other districts?
Yeah.
In this?
Yeah, it really varies. You have a large assessed value because you've got a lot of commercial buildings and things of that nature, which obviously is a benefit for the district because you receive a lot of local dollars. Some of your bedroom communities, for instance, outside of Springfield, that have a large number of students, but not a lot of commercial property that can be assessed. It's more residential, their bedroom communities for Springfield, struggle with that because their assessed value is not high enough. Therefore, their 15% is much lower, if that makes sense. So they have a levy high enough to generate more dollars and do larger bond issues, but that 15% assessed value, because their assessed value is so low per pupil compared to your district, is a challenge. So typically in what I call metro areas, you have a higher assessed value, so that 15% obviously is a larger number compared to your more residential areas that does not have the commercial values to have that 15% much lower. So it really just depends geographically based upon your assessed value. Yes, sir.
Would you know how many facilities that are actually not utilizing at this point as a percentage on how that would impact the assessed value that you currently present to us?
You're talking about assessed property in your community, in your district?
Yes.
That is empty at this time? Yeah, I don't have that data. I could, we could probably work with your county assessor and try to find some of that information. Yeah.
Does it make a difference whether it's...
Well, I mean, if some of those buildings end up getting sold, is it still going to be assessed, and is it going to be...
being sold for lower?
Yeah.
So, okay.
I'm just curious.
You talking about buildings in our district or buildings in our city?
Buildings in our district.
We only have.
I don't even know how many of those we have.
You mean our buildings or commercial?
Our buildings.
Oh,
commercial. Our buildings.
Our buildings.
Oh, you mean
I'm
our
sorry. I thought you were
buildings,
talking about commercial buildings.
I thought you were talking about in the
Our
city.
buildings that we aren't utilizing, and if we were to actually sell
I see.
those properties, how that's going to impact our assessed value overall. I don't know, because that's what you're using, the assessed value number for future projections. I didn't know what that was.
Yeah, I wouldn't know. I would know. Obviously, it would determine, how the assessor would assess that building based upon the business that would buy that building.
Sure.
In the grand scheme of things, with a $4.8 billion assessed value, it would be fairly minimal. Yeah, it'd be fairly minimal. Okay. So here's some frequently asked questions I get, right? And so I'm going to kind of hit on those. What are the current interest rates, and what will they be when they issue the bonds? Well, I wish I could know that. We don't know that. But I want to talk about our conservative approach again about doing this. We have built in interest rate cushion. So, and I'm going to give you a quick example because I don't want to eat all of your board meeting time. Last year, we did not anticipate what we saw in the market. And Missouri is very unique. As you know, you have to call an election by January. You have to have it certified. Most boards do that in December to make sure if there's any type of I's to dot and T's to cross, make sure that gets the county clerk before it gets to get certified. And so we're, as your financial assisters, are trying to tell you what you can run. Not knowing what the market's going to be, not knowing a lot of those things. You all are trying to determine projects without knowing the costs. So it's a challenge, but it's a challenge that everyone in Missouri has because it's the constitutional amendments that we have to deal with. So we always build in interest rate cushion. So last year, we had no indications that rates were going anywhere at this particular time. And as you know, what happened starting in January, and all of our clients, every one of our clients were able to actually go and issue all the bonds that they had on their ballot initiative. There were some districts that do not work with us that did not. The rates had moved. There wasn't enough cushion built in that they actually had to go issue less bonds than what they approved in the ballot language. We don't want that to happen. We know where rates are going, so we've got a fairly significant interest rate cushion built in there, number one. I don't know where rates are going to be. You all hear the same things I hear. The Feds continue to say they're going to increase rates until they can get the inflation curbed. At this particular time, that hasn't happened. If I knew how long that was going to go on, you all hear from the same economists I do that it could be 24 months, it could be longer. I don't know. If I knew that, we could all be in a better position. But we have interest rate risk built in.
Yeah, and that risk considers like the CPI as we are right now, and we're looking at, some people say we're in a recession, some people say we're not. We don't know what the projection is going to be coming into the next year on how that's really going to affect that interest rate yet.
That's right. Yeah, but it's hard to know.
So you think we have a well enough or large enough cushion that, say we're at 15% CPI, that we're still safe?
Yeah, so obviously if the CPI is at 15%, we hope that your assessed value would grow that much as well. I mean, your assessed value should be somewhere in line through consumer price index.
But construction cost also goes up
That's
too,
right.
materials.
That's right. That's right. As goes inflation and everything, right? And that's the challenge that we run into as people's assessments are going up, so their cost of projects.
Right.
So yeah, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. We've got 3 really important factors that we build in for what you're saying. Just cushion to ensure that the 220 is okay with your current assessed value and your current 73 cents. How are the bonds structured? As yet, we've talked about this and we'll hit on it long. It's a 20-year maturity. We'll probably have somewhere around a 10-year call for the board to be able at that point, hopefully save some money on a refunding. Again, those refundings aren't built in, and the district can add to that fund balance through some refundings. Is this a good time to borrow and build? I don't know. I can tell you this, it's still a borrower's market. Most of you, at least I can remember, I'm probably older than most in here, but I can remember paying a very, very high interest rate in double digits for my first car. So when you look at it from a big term perspective, from a historical value, you're looking at a tick right now, depending on how it's structured, anywhere between a 4 to a 465 in today's markets. Okay. Now you say, what happens if it moves? I will tell you, investors build in some of that cushion, if that makes sense. When they're buying bonds right now, our market has some cushion built in because investors don't want to invest where it's currently at. They're going to pad that, so that market moves with that potential rate increase. Is it a good time to build? I will also tell you, this is not for me. I work with construction management teams and architects across the state as we work with school districts. They don't see at this particular time it ending soon. They're hoping for it to maybe level out. At this time, they still can see construction prices increase. When my question to them is, will it decrease? The answer is, have you ever seen it decrease? And that answer is typically no. You hope that at some point it levels out and that we get caught up with that construction inflation. So is it a good time to borrow? I would say, based upon where we're seeing markets moving over the next 12 to 24 months, yes. Is it as good as it was a year ago? No. Is it a good time to build? Again, this is information that I'm getting from those professionals that is going to continue to increase and hopefully at some time plane out.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, our risk, if we could put it, try to simplify it, our real risk here is, first of all, if we're really wrong on our projections, then 2 things could happen. One is we have to increase our levies so we go back on our promise. We don't want to do that. The other is, if we're really wrong on our projections, we might not be able to raise the full 220. Therefore, we build less projects than we promised. So is that really the risk? Or is that the 2 main risk factors here?
Yeah, and the risk factor in regards to not doing the 220, obviously that's going to be determined between now and when the board decides to pass a resolution calling an election, right? Because once you approve the ballot language for 220, that's what's going to the voters. Now, whether you issue all the 220, that's obviously up to the Board of Education. Because you have the authorization to issue 220 million, doesn't mean that you have to issue 220.
You said it doesn't happen like that. If we have projects that we're not going to get to for a year or 18 months,
that's right.
We issue them in chunks. So if the market changes a lot in that time, could we potentially be in a position where we don't secure as much money as we thought? Because we're actually going to market with that a year after.
Yeah, and again, that goes back to kind of what we talked about earlier, is how are we going to market these bonds and how are we going to issue them? So let's just jump forward, let's say to May, when we start issuing the bonds. We're going to look at the markets at that particular time. We're going to look at maybe projections. We're going to look at historical data over the last several months. Where do we anticipate rates? If we still see rates going up at that time, the district we'll have a recommendation for you based upon data. The district may want to issue all 220 if that's what you have. To go ahead and issue them, lock in those rates, because once you issue the bonds, your rates are locked in. Then you can invest those bonds, and as rates increase, as you're not using those proceeds, you're gaining interest on those monies sitting in your debt service fund, in your capital project fund, actually. Does that make sense? So if we see rates like in the past where rates didn't move, I mean, they didn't go anywhere for years. And districts didn't need the money, and rates were so low they weren't getting any interest on those dollars. It made sense for us to do it in tranches. So we would take out a tranche, let's say it's a $40 million deal. We'll maybe do $20 million the first round because they need those proceeds to pay for their construction cost. And then as those monies were being depleted, we'd issue the bonds again. Rates haven't moved. They weren't drawing any interest on those rates. We'd issue the second tranche, and then they'd finish the project. That way they're not paying interest on the remaining $20 million. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So the market will drive that conversation on really what the district wants to do.
Has there ever been a time historically where bonds couldn't be sold? So if you were counting on it 6 months later and no matter what the rate is, no one's buying them?
No. I'm sure they're harder at times than others. I'm going to talk about this in just a second, but the bonds are very attractive to certain investors, institutional investors that are trying to put money in a very safe, secure. They do care about yield, but not as much as finding a place to put those monies away. Large insurance companies, large 401k plans that need to have that money in their portfolio, and it's highly secured. You're a AA rated school district, which I'll talk about in a minute. And so that is a very, very secure bond for those investors to buy and put in that very safe portfolio. So usually they're not very hard, and which is why you'll see interest rates better than just your prime market. Yes.
No, you can't really tell me the answer to this, but I just want you to walk with me a minute. 40% of the United States debt is funded outside of the United States. Are any of these bonds with investors outside of the United States? Are they inside of the United States?
Yeah, they're inside.
You know, they're all inside.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to have, obviously some of these large banks and corporations are going to have worldwide markets. But typically we are selling those bonds in the United States. And I'll tell you that we sell a majority of them in what we call big boy notes, $5,000 blocks. And they may buy millions and tens of millions of dollars based upon what they need at that particular time for their portfolio. And they're institutional investors. We'll get very little retail investors. When I say that, individuals, because it's just not a very good investment for an individual, typically speaking, unless they're working with their broker in their 401k for their highly secure portfolio portion of that. But most of your buyers are going to be large blocks of institutional investors. Large banks, BlackRock, things of that nature.
The other part of that is like the ESG score. Are you familiar with the ESG scores?
I'm not.
Okay, it's where in the world now, many of them are coming to rating financial institutions, banks, and things like that.
Right,
Whether they're okay, you know what I'm talking about then. And so, I was just kind of curious on where we might end up sometime down the road if this ESG score actually does become relevant on how this could actually impact us. Just food for thought.
Sure. Yeah.
I don't either.
Yeah, don't know.
Okay, I have a question. This may be a stupid question, but you keep saying you're building an interest rate cushion. Where are you building in that cushion?
Yeah, so as we're looking at your payment schedule,
right,
we've got 5s and 5.5% coupons built in. Your current tick's at a 465. So we've got some basis points built in, and so that's where we've done that.
Back in that.
Yeah, back in our when you saw the payment structure.
Payment structure.
Yeah, for that hypothetical 2023, we've got higher payments built in than what we're anticipating. Yes.
So you said our current tick's at 4 to 465, but today, as an individual investor, I can take out a bond at 5%, slightly below par. You believe me, right?
Yes.
Because I have that call on my phone.
Absolutely.
So that's today.
Yes.
So how are you building in cushion again? Because this is October, and we're looking at April, May.
Yeah.
Talk to me about that.
Sure. We've got three cushions built, actually 4 cushions built in. One we talked about in regards to no refundings, right? No refundings built in. Actually, another one is we've got no TIF values coming off. Okay, so that's another thing.
What's a TIF value?
Those are your tax increment financing. So those that have tax abatements in your district right now, they have a longevity, and when they go off the rolls and they come back on and become assessed property, we don't have that included. So that's number 2. we have some interest rate cushion built in. So we pay couponing, right? So we've got 5 and 5.5 put on this thing. So that payment structure you saw, I'll have it up on the very first page of the Series 2023 hypothetical, has some higher payments than what we're anticipating based on some higher couponing. And a TIC is a true interest cost. So it's a blended rate based upon what the district's getting. Like I mentioned earlier, we'll have a diversified sale with premium and par bonds. Potentially could be discounts, probably not. Most folks don't like discount bonds. They'll probably be mostly par and premium bonds. And so those premium bonds will potentially, they're paying more for it, right? So they're actually getting you're getting more, issuing less bonds. They're getting a higher amount, higher interest rate, and you're getting more bonds put in, or more proceeds put into your debt service fund. So how that works basically is we're looking at 5.5% coupons. We think your TIC's going to be closer to a 265, the TIC, which is the blended rate of the par and premium bonds of the true interest cost. And that's how we've got that interest rate cushion built in, if that makes sense.
What do you think the bonds are going to be in May?
Hopefully where they're at now. And I'll tell you, the market's been all over the place, if that makes sense. We've seen significant...
So you want to issue it at what, 5%?
Yeah, we hope it doesn't go over 5.5% coupons.
And if we sell the bonds at 5.5, then the cushion we have will be adequate.
Correct.
How high can it go and we still be okay?
It could go high.
How high? Can we go up to like 7%?
Potentially, yes. So
and still be okay?
Yes. And so there's where it comes into my second. You tee me up perfect. The structuring of the bonds. So when we structure these bonds, the district's in such good financial position because, remember, your cash flow, fund balances, that we actually, typically what we do is we do a wrap structure, which means we put interest on the front end as you're paying existing debt. We plug in principal payments on the long end as you've paid your prior debt, right? And then we plan that, like I've showed, every 5 to 7 years that the district can do a no tax increase bond issue to keep that fund balance where we need to for your Form C calculation. Excuse me. So when we structure these bonds, you're in such good financial position and you're in have such good fund balances that are increasing. We actually currently have a lot of principal on the front end as well that we typically don't put in there, which means you're paying off that principal faster. So if, let's say, we see a market that's 6-7%, we've got some cushion built in. We've also got structure built in, if that makes sense. We may not have as much principal on the front end as we do on the long end. We may move some of that principal on the long end and to keep that fund balance on the short end where it needs to be. And then lastly, obviously, your assessed value growth. Okay? So that's the third, actually like the sixth, but the third I've got listed on our conservative approach. But back to your question, is the structure will also offset any significant increase that we see in your assessed value or in your rates.
So you're thinking if we're at 5%, go ahead and sell all 220 and not take the risk. Is that what?
I would say if we're still seeing the markets move, I would say sell them all. Okay. Invest them, get a higher interest rate. That's typically our recommendation. Anytime markets are moving, like last year, for instance, we literally had every deal teed up for the day after they passed the election. We had them moving to try to get. It takes 30 days to state auditor to approve it, things of that nature. But we had them teed up to issue them as quick as we could issue them because we knew rates were moving. We wanted to lock in their rates, and now they're investing those proceeds as they're not utilizing them in higher interest rate markets, so they're getting more money.
They're getting more interest.
That's right.
Even though they issued the bonds at what was it like close?
It was in the upper threes at that particular time.
Okay.
Yeah. And a year before that, we were looking in the twos.
Okay.
So the last thing is assessed value growth. And back to your point, if we see rates going that high and inflation continuing to go up, then obviously your assessed value growth projections will look different as well, right? Typically your assessed value is following consumer price index, which follows inflation. So they all kind of go hand in hand. So let's talk about your growth projections real quick. Your total assessed value has increased 80% over the last 20 years. Now that's with 2 mini recessions and 1 great recession. So that's a pretty good stress test on the past 20 years that you've increased 80% over the past 20. The district's assessed value for your current 73 cents to stay where it's at and pay off your $220 million would only need to increase 9.9% over the next 20. That's pretty conservative. You've increased 12%, almost 12% in 2 years. So when we talk about conservative approach, we've been ultra conservative in about every facet, because we know it's this board's intention to make sure that the 73 cents stays where it's at and that we don't have to increase that debt service levy. So I think that data right there is very important as we look at what does our AV truly need to grow to pay off this $220 million over the next 20 years. And it's barely insignificant compared to the past 20, and compared to the past 2. Okay. And lastly, let's talk quickly about your rating. I know I mentioned it earlier. So when we go in the market, the higher rated your school district is, the better yields you get, right? The higher price for investors, lower yields, lower interest rates for the district. Your district is a AA from Standard & Poor's. That's going to be in the top percents in the state of Missouri. There is a AAA and a AA plus, but there's only a couple districts in the state that have very, very low, I should have astronomical assessed value compared to students and compared to the economics. So you're in a very, very good position. You've received great rates in the past because of this. We anticipate the district, because you have very good fund balances in all of your funds right now. Your debt service is in great shape. We feel that you're going to go through this process again. Your administration will go through a very fun S&P rating call. That's one of your costs of issuance. It obviously is an investment because it drives down your yields. They're going to take a deep dive into your district finances, processes, policies, procedures. They're going to take a deep dive into your economics here in the Springfield School District, just like they did in the past. Here's some highlights of the one that we did in 2020. You can see that it said that you had strong cash-based reserves and a history of that. They're better now, I think, than they even were then. You've got a diverse economy, and you've got moderate levels of debt, which is good. The benefits of that rating, again, the district will receive more favorable rates on your bond issuance because it's a more secure investment for investors. The more secure it is, the lower yields investor gets, the lower rates for the districts. It provides a sense of security for the investors in the district in a healthy financial position. And again, back to the bonding capacity, if you decide to run the $220 million bond issue and we issue those bonds, the district is still sitting at over $151 million of constitutional bonding capacity. So, I know that was a lot of information. I know it was a lot of time, but I want to make sure that the board has an education on really where we're at and why the 220, and more importantly, the conservative approach that we've gone to ensure that the 73 cents will pay for this bond issue. The 3% growth, being conservative as well, is more focused on the long-range planning of the 27 and 33 or whenever the district decides to go again. Yes.
This is a totally different question here. How does Steeple get compensated on this?
Yep. So that's a great question. So you have a total cost of issuance. We are paid on the par amount of bonds that are sold. Only the par amount. I actually looked at the last cost of issuance.
What was your question? I didn't get paid. How is Steeple paid?
Yeah, it's an RFP that we've gone through for a cost based upon the par amount of bonds. I want to say on this size of, I think we're $3.50 per thousand. And then your total cost of issuance last time on 148 million was just over 0.5%. It was 0.6%.
So it's a percentage based on the amount of
par
bonds.
Yeah.
So
that's right.
So
you'll have bond counsel fees, underwriters counsel fees, underwriters where your underwriter fee, your underwriter discount. You'll have your S&P rating. These are all service providers outside of ours. Obviously, your district's RFP. You'll have your paying agent or trustee that gets the money, then deposits that money either in the Missouri Deposit Program or your local banks or whatever you're going to deposit those proceeds to. Then you have the state auditor's fee. So there's a cost of issuance, obviously, and the total cost of issuance on your last was 0.6%.
So Steeple's motivation in being ultra conservative on these projections, because we're putting a high amount of trust in you, the professionals, to do these models, is making sure that we can raise the full 220, because if we raise less than 220, then you make less. And also your reputation.
My reputation. Yeah. Here, let's be honest.
That's why most of them are sold at par.
That's right.
Because you get the percentage of the...
Well, actually, so you benefit from premium bonds because you get more, but we
Exactly.
don't get paid on that, so it's irrelevant.
That's what
to
I
us.
meant.
Yeah, sure.
So why is there no incentive? Why is there no incentive on the premium if that's what's in our best interest? Why wouldn't we?
Well, it depends on what interest rate you want, right? So there's a certain amount of premium bonds that you want based upon, for instance, when your bids come back, and let's say you've got 220 and you're setting at 240, you may want to utilize as much premium as you can, but you're paying a higher interest rate that your 73 cents can still support. Does that make sense? So some folks that may be pushing that if rates increase, that's less premium you may be able to go get. If that makes sense to put in your construction fund because you're paying a higher interest rate. So that's going to be a conversation that we have on how we structure that when the market is after this thing's passed. But back to your question, realistically, my job is to be transparent and educate the board. We're the number one underwriter of the state of Missouri. We have the most clients. We're the number one par, number one in amount. The reason is this. We team with boards. We team with administration. Our job is to be transparent and educate, give you as much information that you can make to make a good decision. Because if I don't do that, the next time you do a bond issue in 2027 and 2023, you're not calling me. And that's really what we're about. We want to make sure you could do more. I mean, realistically. Now, it would hurt your long-range plan, to be quite frank. You could probably go do 240 if the market doesn't move, maybe more. Okay? But when we look at it from a long-range plan, I'm going to get paid more if we do that. But I don't recommend that because I want to make sure in 2027 and 2020 and 2033 that you can come back, get in the market, and take care of your facilities. You've got probably 7 million square feet under roof that you're trying to manage, if not more, not including your outside spaces, your HVACs, your roof. I mean, you've got a lot of buildings that your constituents have invested in that you have to upgrade, right? That you have to keep your learning spaces conducive to the changes learning environments every single day.
So, Britt, can I just say that when you presented this to the task force, you presented multiple ways that we could go in. We could go in above 220 and below 220, and you didn't say which one we had to do. The task force chose that.
That's right.
You gave us options of which one, what it would look like if we did different
That's
ones.
right. And that's my recommendation because I don't want to put the district in a position where you got to go 10 years potentially, right? Let's say we go do 260 and your AV doesn't grow. You're going to be out of the market 10, 12 years. That you're going to be needing bond proceeds to take care of your facilities or add new facilities. So this is a plan that we kind of put with all of our clients that not just doesn't focus on the first issue, that focuses on issue moving forward to ensure that you meet the needs of your students. And that is more important to us so that you call us down the road than to try to go get the largest issue we can get now.
So to summarize, your only payment is you're the underwriter.
I'm the underwriter.
And all the other costs are to other.
That's right.
So
Those
you're
are
just the
service.
underwriter.
That's right.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's the only fee that we have is the underwriter fee. The other fees are your other service providers.
Okay, any other questions, comments?
Very much, very helpful.
You're welcome.
Yeah, that was very helpful. Thank you. Done a great
Thank you
job.
for your time.
It's
I'm
been
glad I'm not on your business.
very personal.
It's interesting time. Thank you for your time,
We
everyone.
appreciate it. So I have had a request that we take a quick break before John Travis finishes up. So if you don't mind, can we please come back in, I'll try to come back in 4 minutes, 7:50, but I know we won't make it. Let's take a quick break. Come back at 7:50, if we can.
Half of this discussion.
Yes.
I hope you found the information that Dr. Blevins presented valuable. It's a lot of numbers, it's a lot of information, but hopefully you left that conversation with the understanding that the projections are very conservative. The 220 is a conservative amount, but we are confident we can keep at a no tax levy increase moving forward. Should something unpredictable happen in the market, what's going to happen is that will impact future bond issues, but not this bond issue, should we move forward. This document is attached, and I'm not going to spend much time here. This is our enrollment for the current year for the September count date. Okay, so every year school districts have to submit, there's an official count date in September and another one in January. And this was our results, and I'm sure some of you were wondering about enrollment. And you can see it by building, by grade. Out here is the difference, increase or decrease. And so if it's in parentheses, it's a decrease. And where I want to draw your attention is at the bottom. So you're going to see two things. You're going to see just a difference by grade. And let me scroll back over. Okay, so difference by grade here, and then difference by cohort. And the cohort is, if I was kindergarten last year, I'm first grade this year. And you see these little colors here, and I didn't really know how to add a color graphic in there real easily, but this just shows you the cohort, right? So this was last year's kindergartners up to first graders, and here's the difference. And what I want you to notice on the cohorts is all but 4 increased. Of the 4 that didn't, the decrease was only by 3 students, so pretty much stayed flat. Our kindergarten this year is quite a bit smaller than last year's kindergarten, which if you look historically, you'll see that. It ebbs and flows. And then the biggest difference was the senior class. There's a lot of factors that go into that, including how we code students based on the number of credits they earn, those kinds of things. So, but the good news from this is pretty steady enrollment. Our cohorts stayed steady or increased for the most part. And so that is what we anticipated would happen, kind of a leveling back out. And as we look forward, we would anticipate this would climb. Could be a slow, steady climb. Again, as you look historically on SPS's enrollment, over the last 20, 30 years, you will see an ebb and flow between 23,000 and 26,000 students. So I think what's hard sometimes is when you look at our sheer size, we get caught up in, hey, it's 1,200 students less or more. But when you look at the percentage, that's a relatively small percentage, 4%, 3%, which is not uncommon when you look at districts across the state. So I just kind of want to point that out, that we are encouraged of the leveling out and expect that we will see a steady climb back up over the next few years. So, all right, that's in there for you to...
John, before you move on.
Yes, ma'am.
Move on, quick question. Pardon me. All the way at the bottom, MOCAP's full-time virtual, that's that new program?
That is.
That the governor, right? That's the new.
That's correct.
Okay, so, because that's why it's a 0 for last, or non-existent.
That's correct.
So that's full-time, 388 from all over Missouri.
That's correct.
But we count that as part of our enrollment,
That is correct.
but they're 100% virtual.
That's correct.
But that's not Missouri Launch Workforce.
Oh, that's not.
Missouri, not the governor's.
Yeah, what's this?
That is the when the rule changed this year, legislation change of students from other districts being on our rolls as far as enrollment. That's what
that's
they are
right,
full-time
because
virtual students.
Or they were in their own districts.
Yes.
Okay.
But remember, parents can choose now whether they want to stay in their district or go
Oh, I
to
didn't know.
another
I
district.
thought it has to be here. Okay, so we picked up 388 students from other districts. Because if they were in our district, they would just be in our numbers.
That's exactly right.
Is that right? Yes. Okay. Thank you. So,
And there are, I would just add, there are some provisions there that if a student's not doing the work,
Right.
that we can actually drop them and they go back to their home site.
Kind of like transfers.
Unlike transfers, right? So Nicole
Oh, you
Lemon
can
is
drop a
keeping a
transfer?
tight thumb on that, and if students aren't participating and doing the work, they're getting their warnings and then they're being dropped and sent back to their home.
but for now, there are on our
As
roll.
of that date.
And their numbers count into our.
That's correct.
And do they go to the, what building? There's no building. It's just.
They have their own,
That's why it's on little
own
thing.
building.
They have their own code.
Got it.
That's right.
So I just want to clarify. So we're back up to now, according to our most recent 9/30 report, we are back up to 24,629 students.
That's correct, and that does include pre-K. That number includes pre-K.
Okay, so we get to count our preschoolers. Okay.
And you'll
So-
notice pre-K was up about 50 students,
Yeah.
roughly.
All right.
When did we start counting pre-K?
When they
So we-
came-
Well, we count them in enrollment, total enrollment, but as far as state aid, about 3-4 years ago, we were able to start counting a portion of them in state aid.
So we don't get paid for them? Fully funded?
We get a portion. So what we're allowed to submit is 4%, trying to remember this, Kara may have to help me, 4% of the free and reduced population of the entire district. So if the entire district is 12,000 free and reduced students, then 4% of that, so 480, we can claim 480 of our pre-K students for state aid.
So we've been able to do that,
That's
right?
correct.
Mhm.
Yes.
We do.
So, and they get all the ADA, all the qualifiers, you know, like special ed or,
Also, part of that pre-K number is our early childhood special education, and those costs are reimbursed 100%.
okay,
Any cost we have with that program is reimbursed.
so they count, basically.
Yeah, it's not part of the formula, but there's a separate funding stream that pays for all
Oh, it's
that.
not part of the formula,
Not the early childhood special ed.
but early childhood is part of the formula as long as it's no more than 4% of your free and reduced.
That's
lunch,
correct.
which right now covers all of them.
Not all, but we're between that and early childhood, we're probably close.
Okay.
So I just wanted to bring that up because we hear folks that tell us that students are leaving Springfield, but we have the numbers here to show that we have a pretty healthy population.
Yeah, and I would add this, if you look back historically, over the ebb and
I've
flow.
been around a while and I've seen those.
Right, but if you look at that ebb and flow, from my lens, you'll see some of that as our neighboring veteran communities are growing. That's when you see the dip, and then it comes back up, and then they'll have the next one that grows, and you'll see a dip as, you know, and right now we know Republic is booming. We probably have had a few families move out that way, but what's going to happen is more people are going to move to Springfield, it's going to fill back in, and we expect that enrollment to climb right back up. Yep.
Great.
Okay. All right, so what Travis and I are going to do, we're going to tag team this next part. And last board meeting, our community task force co-chairs presented to you the official report and the recommendation from the task force. I believe both David and Bridget are out here. Okay. And then we have a few other members of the task force that are here. And so what we're going to do is kind of review that and provide an administrative recommendation to you for the April 2023 bond issue based on that report and the feedback we heard last board meeting. Dr. Shaw is also going to talk through the conceptual design project or process in the projects, the top end projects from the task force, what those conceptual designs are and anticipated cost. So that's what we're going to do. And then at the end, we'll talk through our recommendation and give the board an opportunity to ask questions. Dr. Shaw.
Okay, so a little bit of a step back in time, because in 2017, when the board had a retreat in October, at that point in time, they approved to do an RFQ study for architects to bring back information to the board and eventually the task force, a feasibility study to be able to give renovation costs versus new costs on specific projects. And so they spent about 6 months doing that. They were provided with a list of projects that were had a condition score of less than 70 from the original facility master plan study that was done back in 2016 from MGT of America. Part of the task was planning for the future, making sure everything was equitable, access for all, being able to give realistic options and choices both to the board and the task force for their consideration, as well as giving accurate data. When they were working on the data at that time, that was in June of 2018. The potential bond issue was in April of 2019, so therefore a lot of projected costs. We're in the same situation now, where originally the pricing was provided to me from architects and general contractors, construction managers around the April-May timeframe for a potential April of 23 bond issue, so similar process. So the idea behind the feasibility study was to take these scores, these schools that had condition scores of less than 70, and get them to a minimum of 90 if it was going to be renovation, and then get them hopefully to 100 based on new construction. And so I cannot emphasize enough that when I start showing you visuals and I start showing you slides, these are concepts. Okay, the concepts were provided, as this slide says, for planning and budgeting purposes only. As we went through these 2019 bond issue projects, we were given concepts, we were given budgets based on the program that was given to the district from MGT that said, if you have a 400 capacity elementary, these are the number of classrooms you should have. These are the square footage of classrooms. These are the number of administrative spaces, the nurse's office, gymnasiums, cafeteria. All of those things went into that program to essentially then come up with budgets that represented these concepts to be able to give us cost estimates, okay? And so I can't emphasize that enough, that what you see in the visuals, don't pay so much attention to that, but think about what the square footage is going to become, what the capacity is going to become, because some of them can be misleading if you look too closely at the visual piece of this. So as they did their study, they, at that time, came up with cost per square foot, no different than we did just a couple of months ago. The one thing that has not changed in the cost per square foot is the premium that we will pay when designing storm shelter facilities. And that's a $75 premium per square foot on any storm shelter that we build, basically because of the codes that have to comply with, as well as the safety feature. So the numbers that you're going to be looking at today that I'll show you on the cost estimates are all encompassing with a $330 a square foot cost estimate for new construction. And then you'll see for light, medium, and heavy renovation, you see the $82,152 and the $235 a square foot. So if we're talking about a storm shelter gymnasium, you're talking about $405 a square foot is the construction cost estimate.
All right, so the kind of reviewing what David and Bridget presented on the 11th, these are the list of projects that the task force was considering, and these were previously identified to be on either phase 2 or phase 3. So David and Bridget asked task force members to rank their top 5. Okay, and then what these numbers to the right represent are the number of votes that a particular project got. You can see there's a clear divide between the top 6 and the bottom 6. And just to kind of refresh your memory, David shared if he had one thing to do over, it would be to take these top 6 and say, using these top 6, give me your top 5 and get those numbers, right? And so he followed that up by saying, there's no doubt that those top 3 really stood out. But when you look at the next 3, Robertson, Reed, and Bingham, any of those, any combination of those the board chose to go with based on available funds or need, he felt the task force would support. And so you'll see some of those recommendations here in a minute. But that, we just wanted to pull that out of the report, make sure you saw that clear divide between the top 6 and the bottom 6. So the rest of Dr. Shaw's presentation will focus on those top 6 items. Okay?
So to first start with the elementary projects, we have Bingham Elementary. I want to focus on what that condition score was, 59 out of 100. So you can see very low compared to what we want that to be. So as you look at this concept, the blue will represent renovation. The orange represents new construction or addition or potentially tear down and rebuild. And so the main focus of Bingham is a renovation. We will add some space for the gymnasium, which is be a storm shelter. That'll be a plus for that particular project. The square footage increases about 12,000 from a little over 44,000 up to 56,000. The current enrollment is 400. That is up over the last couple of years. This particular concept would represent a 450 capacity school. Right now, the current capacity is 453. So even though it's smaller, the sizes of the classrooms are smaller in that space. This right sizes that school better as far as this concept goes on this renovation.
Before it goes any further, I do want to emphasize these concepts were developed based on the assumption that no attendance boundaries change. Okay? We'll talk more about that here in a minute.
Okay, Robertson is the second elementary on that list, condition score of 63. The recommendation for Robertson was a new construction. This would allow a single-story school on that property. You can see within this concept, one of the positives to this was it gets it off of Kearney. Right now, Robertson sits right on Kearney. It gets it away from Kearney. It would allow this building to be constructed while students are in school because we would be building behind it. It goes from a little over 50,000 square feet up to almost 57,000 square feet. It would represent a targeted capacity of 350, and this is one where, just to echo what Dr. Mulper said around looking at potential boundary studies later, there's only, at this time, These numbers represented 154 students in that school. So obviously, we need to right-size this, and we need to be thinking about what does that look like if this is a project to move forward. So middle schools, Pershing K-8, you'll notice that that had a condition score of 73. Initially, the list that was provided to the task force was only schools with a condition score of 70. Through the conversation in 2018, the task force brought forward Pershing as a consideration, and they were able to tour this year and gain a lot of perspective about Pershing. So you're going to see two different concepts here, one for K-8, the other if it were to be a middle school rather than a K-8. So this is one where, and I know we had some questions when I met with Kelly and Danielle on this concept, and I went back and I looked through the spreadsheets. Here's one where the visual isn't the best. Okay, this visual represents what looks to be a lot more new construction versus renovation. In fact, the pricing on this one at $50 million represents 100,000 square feet of renovation and 60,000, roughly 60,000 of increase. It would go from 101,000 up to 160,000 square feet. So that's where, in order to be able to have a capacity of 1,100 students, which currently the K-8 has 926, 1,100 students, that would be our largest campus if you talk about middle school K-8 campuses. So the reason for that being 160,000. And so part of Pershing is 2 levels. And so you can see the same renovation aspect there. If this was to go potentially be looked at as a middle school, it wouldn't have to be as big. The middle school would only need to go up to about 141,000 square feet, because that capacity will only need to be 900 instead of 1,100, since the elementary wouldn't be there. So it would go from that 101 to 141, and the condition score obviously stays the same. But again, mostly renovation, but an addition of about 40,000 square feet to get that to where it would be right size. Don't pay attention to the football field and track. We know that's somewhat there, but that would potentially be redesigned if they had to move the building and add different spaces. This slide is here because if this was to, through the boundary study, if it was to be looked at as a middle school, then we would need a place for those students to attend. And so based on the population of around 160 students in Pershing, then we would have a need for 8 classrooms. So this cost of $4 million roughly represents 8 classrooms, potentially 4 at 2 different locations to be determined in that event. Pipkin, condition score of 52, lowest condition score of any of our schools within the district. This was recommended by the task force of being new construction, so you can see just how tight this building would be on the current property. This is a 2-level approach to this particular property. It would go from 80,000 square feet up to close to 108,000 square feet with a capacity of 550 right now. The current population is about 412. So it wouldn't have to be obviously near as big as what Pershing would be, or even the current Jarrett that's being constructed. Okay, Reed, very similar to Pipkin. Condition score on Reed is a 66, so a little bit higher. But again, a 2-level concept for new construction. It does have additional space over what Pipkin does. It also has Lafayette Park that they utilize quite a bit, just across the street for their activities and athletics. But this would take this school from an 84,000 square feet up to 123,000 square feet with a capacity of 725. One of the things that I think you can see on your slides, I haven't specifically talked about the numbers. Dr. Merkel will get into that here in a minute on cost. But very similar 2-level construction with making sure that we have all the spaces that we need for middle school kids and that can fit that particular school. And finally, the safety security upgrades. The majority of this $37 million is represented by our storm shelters. There are 6 storm shelters listed. Many ask why those 6 schools? After the entire list of schools with a condition score of less than 70 that would be addressed, these are the 6 remaining. We actually had 8 because we just finished Field and Twain. but these 6 would remain as being elementary schools that do not have a separate gymnasium. And so all of the other schools that would be on the elementary list, whether it be phase 2 or phase 3, would be addressed through those bond issues. These would not, and so that's why these particular schools are still left in that list. But they do represent approximately $5 million in total cost estimates when you figure construction and all the other costs that go with it. And then finally, technology upgrades. Part of that $37 million, almost 4.5, proxy access on all of our exterior doors to be able to scan in and out very quickly, door alarms on all exterior doors when they're left open, additional cameras, roof security, sensors, and alarms to help minimize the vandalism that takes place within schools and burglary getting through roof access. Also, $2.5 million estimated to place the protective window film on all lower level glass, the same film that we have on all of our secure entrances currently. That would be around all of our exterior windows and any door in glass on the main level. And then a little bit of money spent for improved fencing around mostly our elementary playgrounds to provide security from kids running off or getting into harm's way that way.
Okay, so this next part, and I tell you what we're going to do, we're going to kind of camp here for a second. If you have questions specifically on those projects or the conceptual designs, let's get those answered while it's fresh on your mind, and then we're going to talk the potential scope of projects on the next part. So does anyone have any questions for Dr. Shaw on those conceptual designs? Yes, ma'am.
Okay, on the first slide, I have a few questions. It should go pretty quick.
Which slide, Miriam?
The construction slide cost $330 per square foot.
Okay.
So is that just the cost of building? So is this why, but the hard costs are more than that. Is that because, not excluding the soft costs, is that because it has things like grounds, parking, the infill, the equipment, the furnishings?
You're right on.
Did I get that right? Okay, and then there's the soft, okay. So that's just literally building the building and nothing else?
Right.
Okay, that's my first question.
Until you get in and do the true study on the site itself, you don't know what kind of soils you're dealing with, especially if you're expanding a building, maybe making it double in size. There's going to be part of that property that was never constructed on. So you may have to do things to stabilize that property.
Because it seems to be like a $5 or $6 million cushion added in, and it also doesn't include furniture and.
That's soft cost. Yeah.
Oh, so is furniture and technology, all that soft cost?
Architectural and engineering, consultants, that's all within your soft cost.
Oh, so that's why the soft costs are so much.
Right, right. We budget soft costs at about 20% of construction costs.
But that's just like lighting, door, okay, got it.
So anything that would be furniture, fixtures, and equipment that wouldn't be part of the bid of the construction. Your lighting would be part of your construction bid, but we're talking about touch panel televisions that go in the classrooms, or we're talking about cameras or furniture, any of those additional pieces of equipment that aren't part of that building construction.
Got it. My next question is on so like for example, read, I just want to make sure I understand this right conceptually. So it's 84,000 square feet and you're hoping to go to 123,000, but then the capacity is decreasing. So is this because you're going to have larger lunchrooms, bigger classrooms, bigger gymnasiums? Is that the intended? Okay.
Yeah, and so if you've toured Reed, you'll see that a lot of those classrooms, much like Pipkin, much like the old Garrett, they're small classrooms. So
right.
You might be able to have the capacity be the same, but yet you're cramming those kids in. The gymnasium, much smaller, cafeteria.
Right, so like at Pipkin, the current enrollment is 412. The current capacity is 840, but when we were visiting the building, we were told they were busting at the seams. But then the targeted capacity is 550. Is that because there's classrooms, but they're just too small, or because there's fewer students, therefore, let's say we still have like a 6th grade, science class. Normally that could have 30 students, but now it only has 20.
Yeah, and I can't, it's busting at the seams is a very, could be an interpreted term, and I'm not sure how.
It was like, we had to move, like, these two teachers are combining their classrooms so that we can have a collaboration room, which implied that there wasn't enough classroom space, not enough space.
Yeah, and I don't know that I can speak specifically to that, but if you've got 840 capacity, that was going to be based around the number of rooms within that space and an estimated number of kids that could fit in that space. Doesn't always mean that it's a practical number, but that's what, when the facility planning study was done, and their experts came in and evaluated those buildings, those were the numbers that they came
So
up with.
Pipkin is going to go from 840 current capacity to 550. Do you know why? I mean,
Well, we don't need to build a building for 840 kids if there's only 412 students that go there. We need to build it the right
but
size.
the square footage is increasing.
Correct, and that's because, it's much like, and I can give an example like with Hillcrest. The Hillcrest total square footage of this project did not change at all.
I mean, I get the idea that you want to have bigger, better classrooms, but there's not a cushion factor of, we're going to build this for the next 100 years, just like the last building lasted.
Well, I think for this particular population, to go from 412 up to 550 would be a substantial jump, considering it's been, the enrollment has not gone up in that school. But you'll often see, just like with Hillcrest, that went from almost 1,600 capacity school down to 1,200. We didn't change the size of it, but we made the spaces within that building much more compatible to what they needed. Because the older schools, your classrooms were much, much smaller. A normal classroom is going to be 900 square feet. If we're building a science classroom with labs, you're probably talking 12 to 1,400 square feet. They don't have that now.
May I say that as we toured, the issue that we heard from the people in the buildings that were in those buildings, part of the issue was functionality. It wasn't just the number of spaces or the number of rooms, it was the functionality of those spaces. And so that was one of the concerns that we heard.
Can you go to a slide with the Pipkin box construction on it? I think it's page, I don't have a page number.
19?
So yeah, so like that first floor is like a rectangle, but then the second floor isn't a rectangle. So I'm assuming this is just a,
That middle space in there, those fives, that represents gymnasium, athletic
yeah,
spaces.
oh no, I get that. And I assume that's so that you keep the nice outside facade of the rectangle. But no, the second level, they're not building on the entire first level. Is that just a preliminary conceptual, or is there a reason?
Preliminary, it's a concept based on the square footage needed and the number of spaces. If this moves forward and we hire architects to design this building, it will look very different.
Okay, thank you. So, okay, so that is most of my questions, but I do have some like big idea. So, and I'm seeking clarity. So specifically to Pipkin, and what is the desire of the community is that it should externally have design that it currently has, which is that fits with the architecture, that befits its history and its the character of the building. And then there's some internal, like what would it look like on the inside with an emphasis on what we know works to provide the best learning environment. So keeping that, and being cost effective, right? So we want the best dollar spent to get the best interior with an outside that's what the community would like. So keeping that in mind, so hold on to that. So I assume there's a lot of flexibility in design, as you just mentioned. When phase one worked, and I'm recapping this, so the board was asked to vote 4 times. One is when the ballot measure comes up, so what we're going to be doing in December, what we're being asked of. 2, and I took this notes when we spoke, so I just want to make sure that, because I'm trying to get somewhere with this, the cost and the contract for the design, which will happen actually before we sell the bond, right? So between now and between December or whenever the bond, the board votes to move forward, you move immediately into contracts to find architect, right? Then the third one will be the formal issuing of the bond with Stiefel, when you formally decide. And then the fourth and last time is when the construction bid comes to the board, right? So those are the 4 times. Will the board have an opportunity to be involved so that we can, I know we'll have an opportunity to be involved because we're the board, for external integrity and internal commitment to cost effectiveness and optimal educational environment to the stakeholders. Could we have a vote on the final design? Can we, in addition to phase 1, introduce a 5th vote? Yeah, that's my question.
Can you hold that question until we get to recommendations?
Okay.
If you just hold it. We're going to touch on it if you just hold it.
But did I ask it in a
You
way
did.
that...
Just hold on till we get to the recommendations page.
I'm not saying you design it and you bring it, like, no, we're involved the whole way.
Right.
But that...
Just hold on.
And this is for stakeholder confidence?
Just hold on. Hold on.
Well, that's...
Okay. Cross your fingers. Cross your fingers.
Kind of move on.
Kelly.
On the enrollment slide, can I make a request? I know you
Move
put a
ahead
lot of
on your
information there.
PowerPoint.
It's very helpful. As much as here, can I ask for one more column? Sure. Can we see capacity on those buildings and totals?
It's in the MGT.
It's in the facility master plan. But
It's in the MGT.
Yeah, if I could see that in this document, and I'm sorry, I would have emailed this, but I didn't. When I opened this on Sunday nights, this stuff wasn't there yet, so I didn't know it was going to be there until too late, so I didn't get a chance to get ahead of this. But if it's possible to see on all of these,
We'll just update that document and reattach it.
that'd be really good. And when you're determining capacity, how is that done? Is that updated? I mean, what I'm kind of hearing from some of this conversation is what we determined to be appropriate capacity when they built Pipkin is a little different than what we determined to be appropriate now. So when you are looking at a capacity number, how is that number determined?
Yeah, I think they want to target that 70%, 75 to 80% range. They want to be above that. They want to be below that because it's inefficient. One of the things that I know with the task force and a presentation I did, it showed what that percentage was currently, and you want that sweet spot, and so they want to be where that, all I can think of in my head is green. The green color on the chart was where it needed to be.
It would be occupancy, which is based on capacity. That would be the enrollment versus the total capacity. But how is capacity determined? Is our capacity of Pipkin, which has remained unchanged for decades, is it the same as it was 50 years ago? Our number on...
I don't know the answer to that.
How do you determine what capacity is?
How do you determine the capacity of an actual
Total capacity
building?
of a building.
Yeah, they're going to take, now, I wasn't here in 2016, so I can't speak to how that particular company determined that Pipkin had an 840 capacity.
So it's the company that we hired to do this, whatever it was called, they determined the capacity.
They determined what the capacity of current Pipkin was. And so then when we look at what we projected capacity will be, it will be based around the number of classrooms. You would factor in, 25 students per classroom. So if we're doing an elementary of 300, then you've got 25, you're going to have 12 regular classrooms that would go into that particular space. And then you will have your other pieces, obviously, for your art and your performing arts, those things. But that would be how those numbers would have been put together.
Okay, thank you.
Do they add a cushion, like an extra classroom?
Well, they don't add that initially, but there have been many times through the design process.
So we do have flexibility in moving that capacity because I did peek at the slides coming up. With the redistricting and answering those questions, as we answer those, we can go and tweak these capacities up and down.
And we gathered a lot of that information as we had conversations with the principals and with building staff on what was needed. Because the program may say, here are the spaces you need, but this particular school may have a community site liaison that they didn't have before. They may have an interventionist, or they may have a social worker. Those may not be part of that program, but to make them part of the design, we need space for them. So yeah, that happens a lot.
To your point, I would say we always want to build the building larger than the enrollment. How much larger depends on whether or not we're seeing growth in that part of town, right? And to Dr. Shaw's point, when we talk about Pipkin, for a long time we haven't seen that growth, but we wouldn't want to build it for 700 or 800, but that 150 student capacity above, we feel like that gives us a significant cushion there.
I have a question. So it does look strange on its face that you would build a new building or do a renovation and decrease capacity. But, and you may not know the answer to this question, some of these schools have very large auditoriums where the capacity may be 100, but you don't want 100 students in the class necessarily. So is that a correct assumption, or when they were determining capacity, were they ballparking, we're going to have 25 students in a class and that's it? Or we don't know?
I don't have an answer.
Okay.
I mean, we can try to contact MGT and find out what they used. It was almost 7 years ago now, so I don't know if they'll be able to draw that out.
There's a formula. Got it.
Yeah, that was part of what I sent you today and you today, is this enrollment trend. And it's this MGT report, is an MGT that was done in 2018, that was presented to the Community Task Force by, I think, John, but also they attached the MGT report to it as well. So they made a presentation, and it shows the 10-year trend, plus it also shows the trends going out in time. I think that's something we need to take a look at.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing that. I will. I just received that a few hours
Oh, no,
ago.
I understand that. So, but anyway.
I had more questions, but if I don't want to jump in.
No, I don't have anything.
Well, one thing, just to, since we were on this topic, so I know when we were looking at building one of our schools toward the east side of town, one of our middle schools, there was a lot of discussion on building that. It's been a number of years ago. At the time that the plans for the building, there were also 3, I think, large housing divisions that were home projects. Travis, you may know what school I'm talking about, that were being built in that area. So that was taken into consideration in the building of that school. Because although the enrollment at that time was at a certain number of students, the projection was that when all these homes were built and families moved in, that there was a good chance that enrollment was going to go up. And it did. And so it was just a short time that school was at capacity. So, I mean, all those projections are needed whenever we start looking at this.
So that's in MGMT, you think they looked at all that, or we're gonna have to relook?
This was before we did MGT.
Oh, so we got to relook.
Well, no, this was a different.
We'll talk about that in a minute.
Yeah, that was before. This was before
We'll see if we can
2019.
find out, Kelly, how they
We have to
determine
look at a lot of things.
capacity of existing buildings.
Looking through that report might help as well. And I don't know if it's in this format, but if it is, then I'll look at that. If not, it could be added to this as an extra column. That would be helpful. So a couple of things. The fencing need is a very, and I looked at Sunshine, as you mentioned, that is, especially on a busy street, concern. For $100,000, why don't we just do that? What are we waiting for?
Good point.
Can we, as the board, just say, will you look into and provide just one suggestion? If anyone else wants to echo me, make a recommendation that you come back to us with a way that we can get this done.
We have 36 elementaries, so do they all need fencing?
Well, it's $100,000.
This number represents feedback that I received from our
Just for that one elementary?
Because we have about,
Yeah.
I want to say it's 70 to 80,000 that we're spending just this year alone on several different projects that have gone out to bid. Fencing projects specifically. And so getting feedback from her on what's left, what do we need. So you're right, 100,000 grand scheme of 220 million is not very much.
Well, I would like to make the request that we just get bids on it and you come back to us with an amount that we can approve of where it's coming from. That's up to
Sorry, this is bids on what? How many
On
again?
the $100,000 worth of fencing.
Fencing, okay.
He just said, why wait until May?
Right. Go ahead,
And
just
do we
do
have,
it now.
and do we
I
have
would
other
recommend.
elementaries that?
So his request is for us to research the capital projects needed for fencing for the elementary campuses that were not in the projects for this year, bring back to the board a recommendation of there are 10 elementary schools that still need fencing beyond what we're already doing. Here's the cost.
And put it in
And take direction from
Yeah,
the
and if
board.
it is just
Put
that
it in
small of
this-
amount of money, let's just get on with
Put it
it.
in the budget. Put it in the budget or.
No, we've already approved the budget.
For next year.
Oh, for next
It's budget season time, honey.
Yeah.
Where
are we?
But we do budget amendments monthly.
Yes.
Yeah.
As needed.
Right.
So
Okay.
we can review that.
Do it sooner than later.
Funds are there.
Because if we wait till next year, it's just the bond. I mean, you might as well. But the whole idea is to do it sooner. So you're looking for a budget amendment for this year.
The whole idea is
To take it now.
we have in our reserves the money to do a certain amount of things, and if this is a safety issue that it has that big of an impact for that little of cost, I would like to explore the opportunity of just doing it now versus waiting and putting in long-term debt.
Because
Bring
we have
information
reserve
back.
money.
Just a capital improvement.
Yes.
It is. We'll bring the information back.
But it's safety and security, which is even more of our children,
Yeah.
which is even more
And
important.
if we have others.
And what was pointed out to me, I'll just say to the people, anyone watching, is if you're looking for an example, what we're talking about at Sunshine Elementary, obviously very busy street, fence runs along the street, kids play on the other side of the fence, but that fence just stops and there's a gap between, a huge gap, 100 plus feet, a couple hundred feet between the fence and the building where kids can just run around the fence onto Sunshine Street. So if you're wanting to look for an example of what we're talking about, that's an example of you just put in a stretch of a couple hundred feet of fence and it creates a much safer environment. And I guess there's more examples like that.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah.
So the other question, which again, there's probably more opportunity to touch on this a little bit further, and I mentioned this before, but since you asked the question about these schematic plans specifically, I still would like to point out, or I guess ask, when the opportunity to discuss scope is, for especially Pershing would be the one. I mean, as we're talking a renovation, and we show basically, we calculate a light, medium, or heavy renovation across all square footage, but in reality, all of Pershing may not need to be touched. It might just be some additions or some, so I just want to bring that up again. When can that be explored? And I know you have more of a presentation to give, and that probably fits in with some of the things you're presenting, but just before that gets lost, I want to, again, bring up the concept of when we can actually discuss the scope of that one.
Okay, Steve, anything? I didn't know if I saw your thing. Scott?
No, I'm anxious to hear what you have to say.
Okay, let's keep going.
All right, here we go.
These
So
guys-
we're going to jump into the
Watch, you guys
numbers.
have been on the task force, so you have more.
This first slide right here, this is basically just taking the rank order from the task force, putting it on paper, and you can see that the total overall at the bottom is more than our 220, right? So based on if the costs come in where this is projected, we wouldn't be able to do all that. So just leaving them in order, it would cut off at Robertson, which would put us at about 172 million, which would leave roughly 48 million left over, which is not enough to do Reed, unless we get savings, right? So that's kind of how that was projected. When you look at flipping Robertson and Reed, then that actually puts us much closer to our 220, puts us at 200. With Reed or Robertson being on the outside if money is there. One of the thoughts around that is Reed impacts more students. And so we could guarantee that we would have that broader impact and then come back to that final project as money allows. The third scenario is just changing Pershing to the middle school model. That saves about $5 million, roughly, which gets you almost enough money to do Robertson. You're getting closer. And then the final one is switching out Robertson and Bingham, and that actually puts us right in below our subtotal of 220 based on projected costs. All right, so those are the four different, we just wanted to put that with numbers so you can look at it. And then now on to our recommendation based on the task force presentation. And so there's going to be 2 slides. And so this is the actual recommendation for projects. So that upper portion are the projects that we feel like we can commit to, which would be a new Pipkin. Again, the task force recommendation is to find a site other than the existing site that would be more conducive to a middle school. We do have a potential site that we are working on, and hopefully by December, but January at the latest, we will be able to share that publicly if all goes as we think it will. But if we can't do it on a new site, then rebuilding it on the existing site, which I think goes back to Miriam's comments earlier about maintaining the integrity and the architectural look, especially where it sits. And what I would say to that is, I think we'll take whatever direction Dr. Lathan and the board gives us as far as design goes. I think if it goes back in its current spot, we absolutely would definitely want it to match the architecture of that part of town. If it goes to a new spot, we can still give it that traditional look, but it might be a different conversation depending on where it's located. Reed would be a new construction right where it sits, so those students would have to be relocated to the old Jarrett, which would occur for the start of next year because we would have to demo the existing building. So that's on the list. Pershing renovation, we left the total amount for leaving it as a K-8 because our recommendation to the board, which you'll see, I think it's on the next, maybe it's just on this slide. Next slide, okay, is to conduct a demographic and boundary study and to pause any of the construction projects that involve an elementary until that study is complete. So what we would say on Pershing is that we would not start the design until that demographic study is done, which we anticipate we would have no later than next December. It could be earlier, but that would be the absolute latest. Then at that point, the board can make a decision on whether it would stay at K-8 or go to a true middle school. And you know, the reality is it could be one of three results. We're best served to leave it at K-8. Well, second one could be to push those kids to other schools, or it could be to increase the size of Pershing Elementary to serve more kids. That could be a result of that study. So what we have to just do is be open to what does that study tell us. So we're saying pause that, which we would need to pause that project anyhow, because the new constructions would have to occur first, because we would then have to have spaces to relocate students to, which would be the old Jarrett, right? So there's going to be a phasing, and we expect at the November 29th board meeting to have the project, what's that sheet called, the timeline, the project timeline for you, scope and sequence of those projects, and then the security upgrades. And so when you add all those up, we're right at that $200,000 mark. 200 million, yeah. I wish it was 200,000. That'd be nice. So 200 million. And then right beneath that, in no particular order, is if money allows, then the board, based on the demographic study, could either take on Robertson or Bingham, or if by the grace of God we get really good bids, both, right? And then at that point we will know what size does a new Robertson need to be. Is 350 enough? Does it need to be more? Does it need to be less? What about Bingham? You know, is the current add-on sufficient? So we'll be able to answer those questions and then make a more informed decision, at which point we would initiate the scope of those projects. Okay? So that is the recommendation. So as we take it to voters, it would be that those upper four that we are saying we know, or we are very confident, let's put it that way, we don't want to say we know, we are very confident we're going to be able to complete all of these projects based on what we know about cost right now. And then if money allows, we will do the bottom. We'll then move to those bottom two and prioritize.
You ready for a question for that one?
Sure.
Wait.
Let me do this second part, and then
Okay.
we'll come back.
All right.
Okay? So the other part of our recommendation really ties to the four themes that David shared came out of the task force. We weren't really items the task force should tackle, but thought they should bring to the board. And this also comes from some of the discussion you all had on the 11th. So, number one, we absolutely recommend that we conduct a demographic and boundary study to guide the scope of elementary projects, and that we pause on any design around those until we have that study. The exception would be the storm shelters for those elementaries that are not part of the project. The second bullet is utilizing an owner's representative through the design bid part of the facility projects. And you recall in those themes, the task force said they wanted the board to make sure the buildings were right-sized. And they also suggested that the board have maybe a greater role in the design part than what they had previously. When you talk about all the meetings that go on around design, it's quite a time commitment that I'm assuming most of you do not have to make, although we could certainly try that should the board want. But because of that, we're recommending using an owner's rep. So what an owner's rep is, essentially a third-party technical consultant that is involved on behalf of the district through the design process. They work alongside Dr. Shaw and the architects to review designs, do cost estimates, keep us informed along the way of what the cost of a project would be based on that stage of the design, provide feedback to the architect around the feasibility of the design, those types of things. Owner's rep can come from a variety of backgrounds. It can be an architect, it can be a construction manager, it can be a variety of people with technical expertise. So, but we would recommend that approach to be that independent consultant during the design process. If you don't know, we have 2 project managers that are employed by the district. So during the construction process, they are the ones that are going out and kind of holding the contractor's feet to the fire. So we don't feel like we need an owner's rep through that part of the process. As far as costs, that cost, depending on the scope of what we ask the individual to do, you could expect that to be in the 0.5% to 1% of the total cost of the project. So when you think of a middle school like Pipkin, you're probably looking at $250,000 to $500,000.
For the owner, I'm sorry, for the owner's rep?
For the owner's rep. That would kind of be the high end. It could be less.
Per project, for the project.
For the new construction. So I'm talking about Reed and Pipkin. So Pershing would fall in that same ballpark. I don't know that we would necessarily need to use them on a storm shelter. That's a pretty cookie cutter design.
That'd be a full-time position for this individual, or would that just be a consultant?
It could be, or, you know, again, we got to sit down and decide the scope of what work they will perform. Typically, it's an hourly rate is what happens is you have a master agreement. They have an hourly rate based on different functions. We work with the owner's rep to kind of lay out what their scope of work will be, what their time commitment will be, and then you actually pay them on hourly rate. So it's not a fixed percentage, but in reaching out to a couple of entities that I know that do this, that's kind of where we came up with the 0.5% is probably most likely to be the cost. 1% would be kind of a worst case scenario depending on what level of involvement we ask them to have.
John, what's the benefit? What is the benefit of this position?
Well, you know, let me speak from my time in a smaller district. Okay, so in a smaller district, we don't have project managers and people like that employed. So the benefit is that we didn't have those people with the expertise to fill that role in design. And so they were the person that could help ensure us that everything was as efficient as it could be while we still got the product that we wanted through the design process. It could answer those technical questions. It could have the conversation with the architect in the technical language. Now, that said, here at SPS, we do have people with that construction background in our project managers. I would also say Dr. Shaw has been through the ringer now for the last 4 years and has developed a lot of technical expertise that he would probably tell you he didn't have 4, 6, 8 years ago, but has developed. So to say what benefit would it be in Springfield, I don't know. I don't know how much benefit we would gain from it, but at the same time, if it puts the board at ease that we have that independent person who's not benefiting just from, you know, I know the concerns brought up with architects that they get a percent of the total project cost. So are they really looking to be as efficient as possible? And while my experience would say yes, because much like Dr. Blevins, they're not just looking at the one-time project. They want to be a repeat partner with the district. I understand why that concern would be brought up, right? And so that independent person is that person that's just a checks and balances. So I guess it's more of a peace of mind for the board and the community. And that's where the value comes from. I don't know.
Make a comment then.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
I mean, that's great. I agree with everything you have to say. I work at a electric co-op that has a lot of large capital projects. For all our large capital projects, we hire an owner's engineer to come in because...
And owners, why'd you call it?
We call it owners. Instead of owners representative, we call it owner's engineer. And they have their experience, they have the time to do it, they have the resources to do it. You have two great project managers as well as Travis, but that's not enough. You need some an owner's representative to be able to look at everything. And also, they can add, depends on what we want to do, but there's a lot we can have them do besides looking over the schedule, the cost, the scope, but we can get them in the contracting, bid reviews, that kind of stuff as well. And it's worth the money spent.
The biggest benefit I found when I used one previously was the constant cost estimates that they provided. So every step along the way, they would kind of go, right, what's the market right now? What would this project cost right now, today? And then they can come back and say, we're over budget, we're under budget, those kinds of things.
Our current project managers, they are employed by the district full-time already.
Correct.
And what are their backgrounds?
Construction. Brian Saunders has been with the district for 17 years as a construction project manager. Barb Busick came to us from Arkansas. She'd been with CE for a little bit, but she came up here, Arkansas previous to that, spent 10 years on the airport in Fayetteville. So, I mean, it's all construction knowledge.
And their role when they are not on one of these bond projects, they're employed, or are they contracted for specific projects?
So they were both hired once the 2019 bond passed, knowing that if another bond didn't pass, they would no longer be employed by the district.
They take you through the entire construction.
Yeah,
Okay.
they're in the room.
Which is different than an owner's rep.
They're in the room when design starts, and they're in the room when construction ends.
And when you say owner's rep can have a number of different backgrounds, he said engineer, you said engineer, architect, etc. So it's dependent on the board, what kind of owner's rep we want. And do either one of our project managers have an engineering or architecture background?
They're not licensed engineers or architects.
So it's very similar to architect selection. You put out an RFQ, and then individuals can submit their qualifications. When I went through it previously, we had all those different entities. So we had general contractors submit, and architects submit. We had companies that specialize in being an owner's rep submit. So you'll get a variety. And then you go through the interview process just like you do an architect, and you select someone based on their overall qualifications and how you feel they will meet your needs.
But if we didn't like the cost at that point in time, we could say, actually, the cost is too much for the benefit, we're going to do this in-house.
Absolutely. So actually, what we would recommend is a master service agreement approach where we select an owner's rep. In the agreement, there's no cost to the agreement. There's only cost if you use them. So you negotiate the rates, much like you do with an architect, and then if we use them, we pay the rate. If we don't use them, we don't owe them anything.
Let me jump in and say a few things. So, first of all, question on the estimated cost of the owner's rep to be 0.5% to a full percent to 1% of total hard cost, probably construction, right? Are you sure that wouldn't be if they saw if there was an owner's rep to see the entire process through construction? Because that number sounds high to me. It sounds more like what we would pay for them to be there through the entire thing. But if we're limiting scope to just design and bid, which is a far more limited scope than construction, it seems to me like it would be less than that. So are you certain that that's
So,
what
no,
you
I'm not certain. It could be less than that. So this is just a phone call. Hey, we're looking at, this is a possibility, trying to get an idea. Of course, none of them want to give you a rate because they're like, you really don't know. And I'm like, well, I need to be able to tell my board something. And so those I talked to said, your projects this size, it's going to be lower because the scope of work doesn't necessarily change based on cost of the project, right? So they said it's probably going to be more like 0.5%, could be less. But
And I'm glad you
up
mentioned
to
that because
100%.
for what we're asking for specific scope of work specific to design and bidding wouldn't be a whole lot different on a $5 million project than it would be on a $50 million project in terms of actual amount of work. So again, those numbers just seem, I know you're trying to help us with an estimate here, and we have more work to do, but I think for what we're asking, it's very possible that this would be far less. And
You got to keep in mind, it's not just the owner's rep, so there's going to be cost estimators involved, there's going to be other people that they consult with on the various functions that they have to pay. So all of that is factored into that potential cost.
okay, so my next thought is really just directed to the board. Well, first of all, I very much appreciate this recommendation. I completely agree with it, that we would, thank you for hearing conversations that we've had throughout this process and making this recommendation, and I completely agree. And I agree with you, Scott, on the value that having an owner's rep, specifically just for the design and bidding process, gives us, the board, and also what it does for allowing us to promise the community who's showing up to vote for this that if they do decide to pass it, that we're doing everything in our power to be responsible seeing it through. I would like to recommend, and this follows up a little bit on some of the questions that you had, Sharita, that I think it's important for the owner's rep to be, because we do have staff members that are that have a background of the two project managers and Travis, and I think it's very important that who we hire be hired by the board and that we take a role in that process. And what I would recommend is that if the district maybe sends out RFPs and receives back responses from a handful of people, and they can funnel them down to a few, at which point they do some sort of interviews for that process. If they could get it down to 4 or 5 people, that a couple representatives from the board sit in on those interviews and report back to the rest of the board, I'd be happy to volunteer to be one of those people, so that we can really understand what we're hiring. And then also I think we make it clear in the scope of work that the owner's rep comes back to the board and reports to the board, because there is, I think, a distinction between them just working with staff, because we already have some staff that are doing what they need to do in those roles. I think this is just an extra layer where we should hire them, and they should basically report to us and come back and update us. So I'd be happy to volunteer to sit in on those if we can come to an agreement that that's...
And help me understand again why this particular role should it be hired by the board instead of the other RFP processes? I just don't understand. Help me understand.
Because we're talking about spending $220 million, and it's the elected officials of the board who have the most responsibility to the taxpayers and the voters. There's no one else with more motivation, and this is not to diminish anyone else's intents, but there's no one else with more motivation than the elected officials to represent the taxpayers. And the purpose of the owner's rep is to make sure that everything's efficient through the design process, to make sure that the taxpayers are being represented and that there's no waste in the process. And it doesn't have to be adversarial or anything like that, but it's just an appropriate layer to make sure that the taxpayers who are voting for this are given a seat at the table by passing that through us, the elected members.
Okay, maybe the word confused doesn't take much. But I want to say, or ask you, saying hired by the board, are you saying hired by the district and working closely with the board? I guess, is that?
Yeah, I don't know if there's a distinction other than that we take a bit more of a role in the selection
Oh, yeah,
than we ordinarily would, and I'm recommending doing that by a couple of us board members sitting in those interviews.
So you're recommending, he's adding an extra step in between. You currently hire everyone whenever it's a contract.
Sure.
You're just saying, add one more layer of once the RFP goes out, everything comes in, it goes through the evaluation process by staff, it narrows it down.
Right.
And then part of the interview committee is 2-3 board members that'll be a part of the team that does the interview. It still comes to the full board for a recommendation.
Yes, and additionally to that, in the agreement that we have with this consultant, that it be clear that they come back to us for
presentation.
updates and whatnot.
Right, and that's what I say I would want, who's that, and I volunteer with you, Kelly, is to make sure that we get to review the RFP as well, to make sure things like that are included.
Yes.
The scope of work of the RFP.
So let me review board policy, because in the past, the board has been highly involved in the interview for our auditor, internal auditor. So the board members have served on that committee. However, we did not do the final hiring because that's hired by the district, but we recommended.
Right.
And other individuals in the district served on the committee. So let me lean into board policy, look into board policy. So we could have board representatives on the interview committee for this position. But I'm still not clear on this owner's representative because it sounds like kind of a nebulous individual, because it could be an architect.
I don't think it's one person.
Could be an engineer. Wait a minute. So we would not be hiring a person to fulfill this role?
We'd be hiring a company.
It's a company.
They would have cost estimators, they'll have a project manager.
So we wouldn't be
that project manager,
interviewing,
they'll
we'd
have.
be interviewing a company. So like a
Depends.
consulting company.
We will likely have a mix. We will have companies that specialize in this service.
Okay, okay.
And then we will likely
Following you
have
there.
an architect who's an individual.
Okay.
Could very well.
Okay, just like when we hire a consultant to search for superintendent, when we interviewed companies to be our auditor. So it would be a process similar to that, which would have board members on the interview committee.
Ultimately, they are selected based on their qualifications. So while they can come from different backgrounds, at the end of the day, we're going to say who's the most qualified to provide the service we're wanting provided.
And you could provide an RFP as a proposal, board could review it, and you could send it out, get responses, pick the top 3. Now, is this going to take a long time? Well, we've got some time.
Same process.
Same
We're
process.
going to talk timeline here in a second.
And then they would be selected. They would come and provide all their updates to the board, just like auditors, like other consultants. So I don't see that Kelly's request is anything unusual than what the board has done in the past with other consultants. So now I'm getting it. So this owner's rep is not going to be an individual, it's going to be a company.
But it may be an
It may be, it depends on the final decision.
What I can
Who
tell you-
responds?
What I can
So
tell
how
you,
many people in here that, because I'm not in this business, has worked with one person that does this? Have you worked with just an individual?
we selected
Is
a
it a
company.
company?
So there,
Okay.
when we put it out, there were 3 companies that do this work.
Okay, so there are companies that specifically,
They do this.
they're an
This
owner's
is what they do.
representative company.
And then all 3 bid on ours.
Okay.
Then we had 1 individual architect. We had 2 general contractors that were trying to break into this,
Okay.
that bid. I think those were the 6 that we had bid on ours.
Okay. So we already have 2 board members that have volunteered. Well, I want to too.
No, I'm not volunteering.
Oh, okay.
I just wanted to clarify something. Just want to.
But
Sorry.
we'll continue to
Yes,
to talk
sorry.
about
Is
that.
it- Can
I thought
I
you
do
were-
that before you ask for volunteers?
No, because we already had 2 tonight that
Oh.
have stepped up to say they wanted to be a part of that. So let me look into policy.
Okay. And
You
then I'll
help me
talk
with that.
timeline.
Talk timeline.
But before I do, the last one right there.
Wait, but on the same subject, I just want to, so the slide says utilize an owner's representative through the design bid phase of facility projects. And when you were speaking, you said on behalf of the district. The owner's rep is a consultant, third-party consultant that works on behalf of the district. And it sounds like, and I'm in complete agreement with this, that the consultant works with the district on behalf of the board, sort of like the auditor does. So the district hires them, they work with the district, but just like the auditor comes and reports to us, so everybody works together, and it's this, or board representative. I don't mean.
To use Dr. Lathan's words, we are all the district, right?
Right.
So when I say the district, it's just saying.
It's just like EGL. EGL, the board offered a
No,
contract to
but we
EGL, but they come back
weren't
and report.
involved in, I mean, it just came to us.
Right, but.
Like one day you said, here's the
No,
EGL.
it was some information shared, though, that this would be our recommendation based on research, based on what we needed to do to meet MSIP 6 requirements of people. So, yes, we went through that process, but at the end of the day, that's why we had the retreat for them and for you to make a decision. Because remember, you didn't vote on the contract until August the 16th. So at the retreat, if it had been, this is not how we want to proceed, then we would have started the process over again.
But this is a little different.
I know it's different, but I just want you to know they still are hired to work on behalf of the district, although they will come back and report to the board, because does he have one employee?
And I do want to add that I think the two people that have volunteered, I think subject matter expertise counts. And I think that's why, I mean, I'm really happy to be part of such a diverse board. And this is one of the many benefits. And I just want to thank you for volunteering and thank you for volunteering. I'm sorry, are you volunteering too?
No.
Thank you.
We're still gonna, no, we have lots to talk about between.
So the last item
Get there.
that was also recommended by the task force is early selection of architects to begin the design development process. So let's get to the final slide, all right? So timeline for the next 6 months. And again, this is our recommendation. And so while we're not asking the board to vote on anything tonight, what we are saying is, this is how we're going to proceed unless you tell us otherwise, okay? So tonight, we gave you our recommendation. So by the end of this week, I have to revisit what was just discussed, but by the end of this week, we would like to put out it should actually be RFQ for owner's representative, okay? Again, selecting on qualifications, the scope of work to be determined once selected. So I know some of the stuff that was brought up about what level they would report to the board and stuff, that would really be determined after they're selected. So I don't know that we have to wait and review an RFQ and all of that kind of thing. The RFQ would just kind of be like a broader menu type of thing.
What does the Q stand for?
Qualifications.
Versus P?
Purchase.
Okay, got it.
Proposal. Okay, then on the 11th, we would release the RFP, request for proposal, for a boundary demographic study. We need a little bit of time to put that scope together of what it will include. So that would go out. On the 29th, we would bring back to the board potential ballot language. This would be a first read where you can review it, ask questions, provide feedback. We also would hope to have an owner's representative selected and to recommend that night. All right, so the RFQ would, if we get it out by the end of this week, be up for a couple of weeks. We would then schedule the interviews, go through what I would actually recommend instead of 2 layers of interviews, just having Scott and Kelly be in on the interviews. That's probably the easiest.
John, how many days do you have to put that RFQ out? How many days is there a requirement? How many days you have to put it out?
I don't think there's a minimum requirement. I think we typically, 2 weeks, Kara? I think it's 2 weeks.
Sometimes we do 30 days.
But we like to, I don't
You can do
believe-
2 weeks.
Yeah, but we would do 2 weeks.
How many, based on how many of these are out there, what's your guess on how many will come back?
I think six, max 10 probably. And we would pare that down. We wouldn't interview them all. We'd review their qualifications, pick those who are most qualified, and that's who we would interview.
I just have to ask this of Kelly and Scott. Do either of you, since you're in the business, see yourself out, that you have to step away from any of the individuals that might apply?
Not for me.
I don't I mean, I would only step away if it somehow benefited me, right?
Right.
Or family or something like that.
Yeah.
So, no, I mean, it's possible it could be someone I know, but I.
You wouldn't know until the
Just
fees
wondering.
came in.
I mean, just wondering, being in the
You have to wait till they
business.
come in.
So,
Okay.
so maybe, I guess my request would be just, is it possible for us to just see the responses to those RFQs and then you guys sort through them and make a recommendation on the ones that you want to interview, and then Scott and I can sit in on those interviews? Okay.
You said
And-
they picked
and-
top 3.
And one other question, you had said to me before that it's state statute that we have to do the RFQ and not an RFP.
Architects.
Architects. But it
Owner's
sounds like
rep,
you're,
it can
it
be-
sounds like you're saying the same thing here, that we're.
It can be either one. So you would do
So
an
we
RFP.
can, so we can use their fee structure as a criteria for selecting them, since it's a consultant and not an architect that we're engaging to.
We can. If you're going to do an RFP, you need to define the scope of work and what you put out.
But it would be appropriate in the RFQ that we could ask what their fee structure would be.
I would need to confirm.
In an interview or
Yeah, I think definitely once you do qualifications, you can broach that subject of what is your fee structure.
okay, I guess if you could look into that to make sure that we can include that as part of the process, since we're working on a very tight timeline.
Okay, so then bring that back to award. And the reason we want to get that done is they need to be involved in the design process, right? So also on the 29th, we would award architect contracts for Pipkin and Reed, the new construction, so they could get that going, and then select storm shelters. So we'd probably start with 2, maybe 4, depends on what Travis feels comfortable
We
with.
have 2 ready to go out to bid already, Man and Wilder, so ready 2. That way you have 4 after one.
So trying to get that stuff going, ready to get bid as quick as we can after passage. Then currently, December 13th, the board would be scheduled to vote on proposed ballot language. And we would also award a contract for the demographic and boundary study that night. Get that person going, and then, of course, the deadline to certify is January 24th, and vote would be April 4th. So that's kind of the general timeline. Yes?
2 real quick questions.
No, go ahead.
So, release RFP for boundary demographic study. So I somehow assumed we would do this, but this is something we can't do. We send this out, and these are experts that do this?
We'll hire a demographer.
Okay.
Some districts do, larger districts and other places do have a.
So bond or no bond, this seems like this
It
is
needs to
something
be
that
done.
needs to be done.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you for
And
asking
then-
that question.
I'm sorry. And then my next question, I'm sorry, Scott, I didn't even see
No,
that
no,
your
that's
hand was up.
exactly, you're going with some of the questions I
And
had.
then my second question is, on November 29th, maybe I'm just not understanding the owner's rep. Help me out here, Scott and Kelly, to understand this. So if we're awarding that contract on November 29th, I thought that, so should not part of their scope of work include the architect's contract, or no? No. Theirs is to work with the architects that get the contract on the design.
That's correct.
And so there's no such thing as a dumb question, but some may consider this. So regardless of what architect we pick, they can do state-of-art, 100-year-old, they can do whatever design we want, right?
Well, they will do whatever we direct them.
We direct them,
So,
right. So it's not like an architect has an expertise in this type of building or one that has an expertise in this. These people will have expertise in building schools, and they can do schools that have various elevations and interiors.
And in particular, when we look at Reed and Pipkin, we're probably going to give preference to those who have proven themselves at the middle school level, right? And that's what we're going to look at. So Travis and his team kind of reviews our list of architects and tries to match their skill set up with each project.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other?
Just forgive me on the demographic.
We're not doing no democratic study.
Yep, I get it. How often are these done, and when was the last one done?
Last one was done before, I think it was 16 or 17.
2016 is what you told me when we met. 'Cause I asked the
believe-
same question.
Sorry, say that again?
2016.
For what level?
The demographic study.
The district.
For the whole district, we had one done,
Just the demographic study,
but not boundary.
not boundary. The last boundary Dr. Hackworth found for me was done in 2008.
For what level?
All of it.
When you do that, you do the
Oh,
district. Yeah.
And some changes were made in 2009, the boundaries. We're still trying to find the details on what all changes were.
And typically, how often would a district of 24 to 26,000 do such a study?
Well, I
Yeah,
think,
that's what I was getting at, yeah, how often?
I would say at least every 3 years it should be done. Some districts do it annually, where they review where they're
Definitely
growing.
every decade.
Dr. Latham's been in some large districts. I don't know how often you all,
We had people on staff, and so then you worked with other places. So, but then when you go out for that large boundary study, it was like every 5 years, kind of 3 to 5 years, but really 5, depending on what was going on.
So when you say boundary, it's boundaries between?
Right, if you live in, like the tennis zone that you live in.
Right, where's
your
part
home is
three?
located.
And
Yes.
then what does demographic mean?
As we look at demographics, we're looking at projected enrollment, they're looking at the economy, they're looking at our city, Springfield, really greater Springfield, I don't want to say Greene County, but they're looking at those demographics and what will change. And also, as you think about, like I said, building of complexes or communities,
So it
all
sounds
those
like they're
things.
two different things. You can
Community
do
growth.
both, or you could
Growth,
do boundary. So when you
they
say,
correlate, right? So what they're going to do is they're going to first assess what's your population trends,
they're
where's
going
your
to do
student
both. I get it.
population's
But
growing.
when you said every 3 years, did you mean demographic or boundary?
Boundaries.
Boundary. And demographic, like what, every 10 years?
Yeah, every about 5 is kind of what I'm used to,
When
like
you think
Dr.
about the
Latham.
census and things, sometimes it depends. Like I said, it depends, so.
So we're long
That
overdue.
might be something that we, as a board, set in motion
Yeah.
for future Board of Education. I really think it's important for us, anytime that we have a bond or any type of movement within schools, that we need to know what the growth is within the city, what's the decline going to be. You're looking at potential unemployment rates. You're thinking of so many different aspects within the community, and that's very important to stay on top of for us.
Absolutely. Now, one other question. What do you estimate the cost of this to be?
Cost of,
You studied the boundary, the demographic, and the boundary study.
I don't know, Scott, what it would be for a district of this size. I did one in my last district, which is about an eighth of this size, and it was about $18,000.
18 times 8.
Well, it doesn't.
I don't think we did that. But it's
Okay.
probably worst case.
Costly. But it's worth it at the end of the day.
And
It's good money well spent.
we did have Matt Morrow from the Chamber of Commerce come and give us a lot of good information for the task force to be able to look at and consider when it came down to these decisions. So it was helpful. Something similar to that,
Yeah.
but more intensified when we hire somebody.
Well, the demographic study lets you kind of plan, really is what it does. It lets you see where you're going to see growth, and plan for staffing, plan for facilities, all those things. Yes, sir.
I make a request to maybe Denise that on December 13th, if we're voting on the ballot language, it's the same day that we're voting on
Strategic plan?
strategic plan.
So you want to stay till midnight?
It's gonna be really late. Can I make the request that the strategic plan be ahead of this on that agenda?
We'll write that down for the agenda planning. You want strategic plan first?
Like it was tonight, if they had this.
That would be my request.
Okay, I'll write it down.
Are you saying on the same night or a different date?
13.
Same night.
Since both of those things are colliding on the same night.
So that,
We end up
so,
with a special meeting on December 8th.
I'm just
We can
curious
take care of
about
one of those
those,
then.
why.
yeah, I was just going to say, but
I think it's
possible.
coming to some sort of understanding of what the strategic plan is, just just being totally in the dark on it right now and where we're going, and knowing how big of a thing this is and how big it is of a promise of us to the community, even though it's just a matter of moments apart. To me, it's important when I'm making a vote to recommend that we spend $220 million, or put it on the ballot to potentially spend $220 million more to invest in this district, that I have an understanding of what our long-term plan of the district is first.
Okay.
So I would just like to see that first before we.
I think Denise just said something about a special meeting December 8th. What did you say?
We could always request a special meeting on December 8th and do one, and do another on the 13th.
Just kind of allows you to focus.
I'm just throwing it out there, although December's a busy month.
The 8th is a Thursday.
Oh, that's a Thursday. Is that a Thursday?
December 6th.
6th.
Is there like a taboo on, is Tuesday the golden day? Like it can only be on
Yeah,
Tuesdays?
that's when our brains work best.
I have my Tuesdays free.
That's when you know have your Tuesdays free, most of it, but it can be any day that you select.
We have some time to think about it, and we might have Tammy send out some availabilities if the board believes that we need to have a special meeting on December 6th to talk about strategic plan.
Focus on strategic plan that night might
And
be a
then
really
December
good idea.
13 on,
Especially since the deadline for strategic plan is the 15th.
Yeah.
Get a little buffer there.
so we'll ask Tammy. Tammy, would you?
That does reduce the amount of time that we have to review it, which was one of the issues we talked about earlier, having that almost 30-day period between November the 15th and December the 13th to review, give feedback, and go back and
But
forth.
it helps us get closer, no?
It all depends on when they give us the information.
Well, we can think about it. So Tammy, just send out and ask the board for their availability for a special meeting on December 6th.
So is it possible just to kind of poll everyone? Because we have to still go ask the consultants if they're available, if that would help. Is the 6th available? I mean, it would be helpful if we know that it's
Yeah.
available for the board, so we
Steve,
can
what does your
contact the
December
consultants
6th,
tomorrow.
it's a Tuesday, look like?
I'm good.
Okay, we have one yes. Kelly?
Merry Christmas.
So,
Okay,
Dr.
two
Lee,
yeses.
That's also the Special Services Transition Fair at Central High School. Is that a day thing or a night thing?
I don't have that on my calendar. Is Brett here? What is that?
It's
Right,
probably a
what is-
day.
For whatever reason, I have this because I read about it and it seemed like something I wanted to attend. Special Services Transition Fair at Central High School is on December 6th.
Another check. I don't have it on my calendar.
I am free that evening.
Tanya on that.
And if this is the evening, I'll just have to
Steve?
miss
Okay.
it.
Scott, what does that look like for you?
I'm good.
Okay, it looks like that we could maybe hold it as a tentative as needed. And yes, you are right, Sharita, that it would reduce our strategic plan time. However, it might be very valuable for us to have that evening to discuss.
Would you like to start earlier or start at 5:30 or 5, or what would you prefer?
Why break tradition? I don't know, 5:30 seems.
5:30? Okay. We will check with the
Because it's a
consultant.
special meeting, we don't have.
It's just a retreat.
Right.
So it's basically a
no
retreat.
comments, it's just
Right,
you come
it's
and
just
get
a
to work.
workshop, right. Roll up our sleeves and get to work.
Okay, John, you have
Yeah.
anything else you want to talk?
Last slide.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
A good presentation.
Good work.
We'll give Nicole credit. She cleaned it up for us.
It was a lovely presentation.
Lovely.
I'm lost, so let's see, where am I? Okay.
On,
We are now.
Superintendent's update.
Yes, we're at 11.1. Oh, yeah, no change orders and agreements this evening, so we're moving on to 12.0, superintendent's update.
Thank you. Our next SPS University board members will be Thursday, November 10th at Glendale High School. Please mark your calendars. We will also hold our choice fair in collaboration with SPS University in order to provide parents with additional information. So annually, we hold a choice magnet fair. So it will be held in conjunction with SPS University. Also, last week, we had the wonderful pleasure to induct 2 more SPS Hall of Fame inductees, Judge John C. Holstein, a 1963 graduate of Parkview High School, and Anthony Tolliver, a 2003 graduate of Kickapoo High School. As a reminder, parent conferences are being held this week and also next week. Thank you.
For SBS University, last year they were like breakout sessions and all that. Are they going to be like that this year?
Yes. It'll be breakout sessions. So we start with the dinner and community resource fair, and then we move into the general session, and then we go to the breakout sessions.
Do we have to sign up or can we just show up?
No, you just show up.
You just show up.
Okay, so that moves us on then,
That's
anything
it.
else?
Yes,
Okay,
ma'am.
thank you, to 13, Board of Education discussion. So at this time, are any board comments? Anyone? I have a comment to make, but I'll wait till see if anyone else have anything. I know several of us were able to attend the SPS alumni reception and luncheon, which was always a wonderful event, but some of you might want to make comments. Steve, you have?
I do want to remark about St. Louis Central Visual and Performing Arts School, that if we can keep them in our hearts and our minds and our prayers, it's near and dear when we're a school system and we have another school system within the state of Missouri gets an impact like that. It's tragic. So just keep them in your prayers. That's what I want to talk about. Heidi Hardy, is it? Did I get that right?
Yep.
She has 21 years. Is that right? Well, I noticed that it was on the front of SPS.org and everything, but I just thought I'd give her a shout out. Thank you very much. It's really awesome. 21 years of service is a long time.
She taught me everything I know about Central.
Did she?
Yep, sure did.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Okay. Scott, do you?
I don't have anything.
Anyone have anything?
So just say real quick, because I was at that SPS Hall of Fame induction, which was a great event, and it was awesome to sit and hear from those two people. I did not know the judge, but it was great to hear his story. But also the other inductee, Anthony Tolliver, I've had the fortune of knowing since third grade. He's a very good friend of mine, and there's not a better human being in this world, and no one could be more deserving of that honor than he is. So just wanted to say that.
Right. We've had great inductees, and what Anthony had to say was very, I think it should have been very inspiring for the students that were in the audience about his message on being the very best you can be for the role, that you're playing, that identify your role and be the best you can be. So it was great. That's always a great event. So, and I did want to mention to the board today that several of us attended an event, Springfield Business Journal's Most Influential Women in Springfield, which our superintendent was honored. And it was a great event, yes. It was a lot of fun. Her video at some point in time, you might want to catch her a little video that she followed the instructions, which were to do a little video that kind of shows a little bit of your personality, and so that came through. It was a great reminder from our pep rally that we had earlier in the year. So that was a very fun thing to attend, and there were many, many positive comments from the community about Bernita and her work in our district. So just wanted to mention that. Anyone have anything else want to mention? Okay, so our upcoming meetings, oh boy, we might have a lot more than we thought we were going to have, as it turns out. So what are our next meetings? We have
Right now, you're scheduled for the board study workshop session on the 15th.
On the 15th.
Not study, just retreat, no study session.
Well,
retreat on the 15th, November 15th, and then we will be able to enjoy some time with our families. For Thanksgiving, we'll come back for a regular meeting on November the 29th. Oh, and don't forget SPS University on the 10th. So yes, we have a regular board, and that's a combined session on the 29th. So we'll be packing a lot in that night. And then Alex, we could potentially have a meeting on December 6th. Gosh, I'm hung up on the 8th, and then the 6th, and then come back. And so then it'll be our holiday festivities. So, okay, and then we do need to go into executive session. So the action is that the board meet in executive session to discuss real estate, personnel, and audit matters as provided in section 610.021, 2, 3, 13, and 17 RSMO. So do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Scott, and a second by Sharita. So at this time, please vote accordingly. Oh, good. And so motion carries. And so at this time, the board meeting is adjourned. Thank you.